record on this computer. Bam. Let's go and take a look. So yeah, I've really been thinking about community here and wondering how we're going to carry this forward. I feel like there's something about tracking everyone going through their different phases in order to allow everyone to learn from each other. And I'm still looking at Circle. I just looked up Geneva. And you guys getting echo?
Yeah.
I don't know what the fuck is going on.
Your doppelganger is back.
How about now? Is this better? Is you getting echo?
Mhm.
That's better.
Okay.
No,
So yeah, I mean, Slack, setting up a different Slack account, or I don't know. I'm just putting it out there, and I'm just gonna lean into it, and we shall see what happens from it.
Like it depends on what kind of features you're looking for. You want to share, different types of media, or you just want to chat, or
What does everyone here want? What's gonna keep you engaged? I don't want like a dead community where it's like, oh, this is cool, and then like it's gone. It's like I want like these conversations that we're having here, like, hey, how was your week, kind of thing, where it's like Cheers, where everyone knows your name, And
something I was just thinking of, Bo, while you were talking is, I wonder if you could create, I don't know if it works on a platform or not, but create a reminder where we add it on to our calendars to check in. Because I know for me, like if I get my Google notification that says, hey, it's time to check in, or this is, built into your calendar, then I'm more likely to go, oh, that's right, I need to check in. So, because I often, like Slack, I turn the notifications off or it goes forever. So if I had like hey, go check your Slack once a day or every other day, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm going to jump over to the Rome Book Club Slack and check it out. So just something to add, something where we can add to our calendars to check in, I think will help with accountability as well.
Yeah.
I find, sorry, I see Beverly has her thing up.
You could go, Heather, or I could.
No, you go first.
So here's what I like. I'm beginning to work on my personal Zettelkasten now, and just questions come up, even though I try to work through them. And I would just like the opportunity to reach out to you all and say, hey, what do you think? And I would like the opportunity to weigh in on if you all have questions. And I just find that that's just a tremendous learning experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, like today, Michael and I got on a Zoom chat and I showed him my version of trying to integrate it for me personally. And we walked through it together and he's like, I don't think this works. This might work. And he's like, oh, that gives me an idea for mine because he hasn't done his yet. And it was really, really helpful for both of us. And he'd be like, I wouldn't do that. And then when I defended it, I'm like, well, I'm doing it because of da-da-da-da. Then I'm like, okay, I'm good with that. So even that helped to be able to say, I think this is what I want to do. But then when I defended, it was like, yeah, I for sure know that's something I want to do. So that even was helpful.
And there are some, I think that's right, Samantha, and you and I were chatting just briefly yesterday that we had a similar situation, but there's also, I can just see that there's some features both now and upcoming that I might get stuck on integrating. And I know I'm being very selfish here, but those are my feelings.
What if it was something as simple as this, where it's just like, listen, it's like weekly meetings like this, right? And it's just sort of open discussion forums for like 2 hours or an hour or something. And it's, have this just, I feel like the video and audio in this atmosphere is the most profound part of any of this. And as for communications, maybe like an email list, I guess, or just like reminders, I guess I can send out instead of like trying to figure out Slack or trying to figure out Discord or,
I've always found email lists to be great. Like they're not complicated. Everybody knows how to use it. And then especially if we're organizing a once a week thing or a little bit, it seems like a great way to go forward.
Yeah.
Because all that other stuff is heavyweight, like Slack and all that takes effort.
All right. But one thing, I'm in a circle community. It's where Yina and I actually met. It's nice that there's persistent things there that you can interact with asynchronously.
That's what I
Right.
like.
So if someone has a topic, they can kind of post it, and people can interact on that topic or that thread. When they can get around to it. Whereas email is just kind of top down. One person has to maintain it. If it starts getting, people reacting to that, it can overwhelm your email box. And then at a certain point, you're just like, I can't handle all of these. So there's a place to, let's just say there's a session, right? And somebody says, hey, I've been working on this piece. I want to host a session on how I build my, Zettelkasten and doing this. Then somebody can say, you can record it, and then you can host the recording there.
No, Chris.
Go back and look at it. Yeah.
Chris, can I ask you a question though? How easy is Circle to learn?
It's pretty easy. I mean, I can show you just real quickly the page.
You know what, Bo, Rome is not a walk in the park. I feel like anyone on here who can figure out Rome could probably figure that out.
You're actually right. Okay. Could you give us a quick runaround of it, Chris? Just so.
Sure, I can just show.
Nina's done it, but I want to get as many perspectives as I can because I like the idea of doing both because that way you can have synchronous and asynchronous communication. And as long as everyone is okay, jumping onto Circle, then I feel like that could work.
It doesn't have to be where you are, forever, but it's just kind of a nice.
That's actually
place. So are you able to see this screen?
Yes.
Actually, hey, look here, Matt B. How many of us are writers using Zettelkasten? So this is Nest Labs. If anyone's familiar with it, it's a really great place. Lots of, not sure who else on this call is in that group, but it's a really great group. A lot of overlapping topics of interest to us. So there's kind of some main pages here. So you have, events and announcements, introduce yourself. People just kind of put some info on there. People sign up.
This looks like simple enough.
It's very simple. It's very easy, and it's very functional. It's a nice looking, pleasant design. When people hold events, they put their recordings up here. Okay, here's the meetup. Watch the recording, read the chat log. We talked about these things. Here's the recording that you can watch from here. Nice. You can do messaging, if you just wanted to reach out to someone directly, get notifications on certain topics. Now, something else that I saw that was interesting that came up, and then I'll stop, is and there's all these channels. So people set up channels, and then each person can kind of set up their own thing here, and you get the notifications, so people, if you wanted to go off topic, and people could do that for their little groups. But I saw an email that came out this week, and I don't know if that's something that's maintained by the admin or Circle itself just sends it out. But it's like, hey, these are the top topics that people are, the top threads. That
solves that problem with the email. That's great.
So
that way I can send out like, hey, here's an email for, hey, we got a Zoom call on Thursday night. We're going to do a, kind of thing.
Right.
Because what happens with group emails, Bo, is like I was in this leader impact group, and the leaders sent it out every week. And then you'd get some people would reply and some people would reply all. And I'm like, I don't really care if you're going to be there or not. Like, I'll see when you're there. Like, only the leader needs to know how many people are going to show up. And then sometimes like there'd be a link problem or somebody need to do an update. And then the way Google stacks them, sometimes someone put like, oh, my grandma died, this happened. And then somebody replies all and it goes on top of it. And then you actually don't see the message that someone put in the middle because it continually stacks. So it doesn't work very well at all in a group. Like it didn't work at all. It's terrible.
What is this chat?
And I'm not saying that it's the be all end all of anything. I'm just saying It's simple, it's easy, it's user friendly.
I just
there may
wanted to
be other
make sure,
alternatives.
yeah, I had enough information moving forward. PTYA course hosted on Abdal. I just don't like going to the Circle website and I see a huge picture of Tiago. I think that's what it is. I think that's what turns me off.
I think a lot of people in this community are starting to host things there. You know, people
Okay.
building their own little mini communities.
Okay, I've got until Sunday, so I have time.
Yeah, I do like the Zoom calls. What I don't like, especially, or it's not that I don't like it, but I just don't really understand how somebody can be engaged in a conversation and still be chatting in the, typing messages in chat. To me, I don't understand multitasking, I guess, at all. I mean, I get it, but I just find I have to kind of do one or the other. So I often will just ignore the chat and then hope that somebody saves it, and then I'll go back if there are links or something to reference later. But I feel I'm not engaged with what people are saying if I'm also typing at the same time or reading the chat.
Can I?
You're a jazz drummer, Rick. How can you say you can't multitask?
That business about independence is a myth. There's thinking about it, it's all linear, but topic for another time, perhaps.
You know what I'd like to do is I'd like to just go around real quick and just do a quick 2-minute recap of where you're at with the last 5.5 weeks here. And yeah, I just like to do that. And we'll start with, I'm just going to look at my list here. We'll start with Rick.
Okay, I'm going to take my 2 minutes to read something from Jerome Bruner, who Sankey references in, I think it's in the chapter coming up. I just kind of looked at the preview, and he references Bruner's Beyond the Information Given. But this is a book of Bruner called Actual Minds, Possible Worlds. And I just happened upon this and talk about serendipity or Jungian synchronicity or whatever you're, whatever you like for you mystics. There are two modes of cognitive function, two modes of thought, each providing distinctive ways of ordering experience or constructing reality. The two, though complementary, are irreducible to one another. Efforts to reduce one mode to the other or to ignore one at the expense of the other inevitably fail to capture the rich diversity of thought. Each of the ways of knowing, moreover, has operating principles of its own and its own criteria of well-formedness. They differ radically in their procedures for verification. A good story and a well-formed argument are different natural kinds. That's the key sentence there. A good story and a well-formed argument are different natural kinds. Both can be used as means for convincing another. Yet what they convince of is fundamentally different. Arguments convince one of their truth, stories of their lifelikeness. The one verifies by eventual appeal to procedures for establishing formal and empirical proof. The other establishes not truth, but verisimilitude. It has been claimed that the one is a refinement or an abstraction from the other, but this must be either false or true only in the most unenlightening way. They function, and this is the last sentence, they function, that I'm going to read, they function differently, as already noted, and the structure of a well-formed logical argument differs radically from that of a well-wrought story. I just thought that was so point on, as in terms of top down, bottom up, logical, thinking, reasoning, and then storytelling and that aspect. Anyhow, I think there's grist for a permanent note.
Thank you, Rick. Antoinette, would you like to share for 2 minutes about where you're at? What's going on?
Oh. Before we start po our book club, I first discover your system po on YouTube by Sir Rob's interview on you po, and I started taking smart notes at that time and accumulated over 30 permanent notes. And when I joined the book club, out of nowhere, I just decided that I restart. The very first day that I make my permanent notes in the shared graph is the start of my new permanent notes because I've been doing it wrong. Yeah, there's too many directions. I'm I feel overwhelmed with the first my first intake of that YouTube video, and I don't know where to go, and I feel overwhelmed. So I decided to restart everything from scratch and just do what Luman did and what Serbo suggested also, that I will just go in the path that I like and what interests me, and then everything will come into its place. And it's really a good advice. Thank you very much for clarifying everything. Although I'm in awe in terms of its application in casting in academics. So I'm still figuring it out, and also this will be also the main topic for my one-on-one session. I'm really sorry, sir, for last week's. And then yeah, because my course is very technical and engineering, like what Peter also was always mentioning. I'm thinking of how will I combine everything that I learned from Sir Joel, Sir Lucas, and Sir Bo, and yeah, it feels so different, and yeah, that's what I want to share. Thank you.
Beverly?
I've started working on my personal Zettelkasten. And I was thinking this morning, like, well, wonder how long it'll take me, not how long and how many notes it'll be to critical mass. Simply because, you know, I've got work related and then, you know, other interests. So I mean, that's a curious question to me, and then how they will segue. I will also say this was very apropos today, perhaps. I was talking to somebody who had never talked to before, a client, and he just out of the blue says, "Hey, have you heard of this thing called Rome?" And I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, I have." And he goes, "Well, I've been thinking about these things called smart notes in this book." And I said, "Well, funny you should mention that. I really have a course for you, and it seems to be coming up in April."
Wow.
So I'll just share that. But I'm very grateful for this group and being able to come here and participate each week and just learn and soak up. So thank you all. And thank you in particular, Bo.
Yeah.
Can I just say one thing? You teach them. You have an opportunity to teach them. That's the best way to learn this. Next, Chris.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm still, you know, a little behind from everyone. I'm not as far along. I think the progress I'm making where I can is good. I'm really digging into the fleeting notes and all that, and that's sinking in pretty well. And Bo, we had our session, one-on-one session with where I was at, and I almost skipped that. I'm glad I didn't, because you really helped clarify one point for me on where to do a fleeting note, right? Don't just go read down the whole paragraph and make fleeting notes as I go. Like if I'm stopping to make a note, something should come from that one line of thought. So that was huge for me. But I'll just say, it's an incredibly busy time for me, but I intend to continue. So hopefully the graph will stay up. But this is just me voting, hey, please, if we can do something to keep the community going, because the way, we can't all just rely on you. You've done a lot of heavy lifting here. You've got a lot of videos and stuff that you put together that are amazing, but just also the relationships and the resources within this community. Whatever we can do to keep that going, so that I can just, go to, Samantha or Michael or Curtis or whatever and say, hey, let's see what you've done and compare notes. I think we've got something really special here, and whatever we can do to keep it going. I don't know if I can maintain the same intensity, but just keep it at a low burn for a while, and let people come and go as they need to. Man, we've got something special here.
Colby?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, it's really echoing on my end. Anyway, it's going all right. Having a bit of personal issues happening right now, but I'm staying on track. I'm just trying to wrap my head around certain things and having certain family struggles right now, but that's a different topic. Yeah. I don't really know what to say right now. Like, it seems interesting. It seems great. I like the community too. Like, things like everyone else said, I think having a weekly session kind of thing, even if we have like a sub book club if you want, or even a topic based when we're getting together, so that we kind of talk about a common interest. I don't know really what to say. Like I said, I've been having lots of struggles, but it's not so much to do with the book club. It's because I had some things thrown at me in life that I wasn't expecting. So I'm just trying to deal with everything. Just to, not gonna really broadcast across the book club, but yeah. So anyway.
Thank you, Colby. Keep going, please. Sorry.
So I don't really have much to say. I don't really say. So, okay. It got to be time day. Okay. Oh, 27. Oh, seconds. Okay. I don't know. Enjoy the community. It's all interesting concepts, and trying to wrap my head around how to do it properly. So I don't know.
Thank you, Colby. Curtis?
Hey guys. Hey, I'm really appreciative of this group, I'll have to say. I mean, this is, well, I mean, I've said it before, but it's the number one most important thing that I need to master at this stage in my life. Unfortunately, also at this stage in my life, I have more than I can handle in a broad scale fashion. And I want to get to the place where I can actually focus on the important and not on the urgent. But I have so much that's important that I'm kind of having to focus on what's urgently important in a sense. And it's like, I find myself in that place, but I'm trying to break away from feeling like these things have to happen right now, and to try to just take everything and put it into a balanced state. And if I have something pressing, I can just scale back and leave some time and not have to focus like whole days and such into that process. Oh, hold on. I just had I apologize. Let me put that on mute 1 second. I just had somebody else call me up at the same time and it came up automatically. Let me put that, hold 1 second. Anyway, so basically in that's a perfect illustration of the exact problem I'm talking about. But basically, I want to get to the place, and I want to get to that place soon, where I'm actually doing 2 to 3 permanent notes per day. It's scheduled into my day. I'm just doing it. I'm not having to bust all this out. I'm just I've got a rhythm, and I'm handling everything in a rhythm, and I'm applying this zone of building up my Zettelkasten with the priority that it deserves, which is daily meaningful focus. To the tune of, sorry, that's coming from the other zone. Let me pause that. It's coming really loud. Okay, done. Sorry, guys. But anyway, I want to get to the place where I'm actually able to do that. And I'm allocating a quality 3 hours a day to this zone, because I think this zone is needful. I feel like I'm being neglectful if I'm not giving it a good 2 to 3 hours on a minimum side of basis, just because it's so important for me. And so I'm very appreciative of this group and everything you're doing, Bo, and everything else, everybody else is contributing, because before a major break was just not having a sufficient organizational structure that my work was feeling like it was all going to be fully realized. It wasn't going to just fall into the black hole of notes and such as that. And so that's basically where I'm at, and what I'm really appreciative for.
Thank you, brother. David?
Oh, already done? Perfect. I felt like it was really important to show up every week to this forum. I wasn't expecting the workload at all in terms of the day-to-day stuff. So I think I got up to about day 4 or 5, but I thought it was really important to continue showing up and being part of the community, regardless of the state of my Rome endeavors. My path, like I come from the Devon Think side, so I haven't actually used Rome very much. And there's a book based on Devon Think and the Smart Notes book. I think I mentioned it to a few people, but so it's how to take smart notes in Devon Think. And then he did a series about comparing Devon Think to Rome, and then I went to Rome, and I ended up in the first book or second book club, and then here I am in this because anyway, it seems really interesting and good people, and what you've shown is really, really powerful. And so I still need to work through how I'm going to apply that. But yeah, you've just done an amazing job. And I'm thankful to everybody I see in front of me. You've been fun to meet with every week as well. So look forward to continuing. I probably am way shy of my time, but I'm happy to pass it on. There you go.
David, is that the Karish Dini book? Is that the author?
Yeah, good luck pronouncing it. You sounded good to me. Yeah, Karish Dini. I think he's a psychiatrist. Yeah, he's written some really good books. I've 2 other books that are really worth reading. But one was like Mastering Workflow or something like, or Workflow Mastery, and the other one is something about OmniFocus, I think. So yeah, he's a really amazing author, very in the productivity space, but he's a psychiatrist, so he uses.
I think he plays a little.
Yeah.
I think he also plays a little piano, right?
Yeah. He does, yeah. So, but he brings kind of a calmness to work, if that makes sense. Like he gives you space to work. Like instead of feeling like you're procrastinating or this or that, it's a lot of the similar things that we've been talking about here. Do what you like. So, anyway.
I think Bo studied breathing with him.
Thank you, David. Glenn, I'd like to hear from you.
Hey, getting my microphone turned on here. So yeah, I feel that I've actually been doing pretty good with this. I feel really feel really good about it. I feel like I'm basically in the air now and I'm flying. It's just like a lift off and I've been in the air and I'm pretty ecstatic about it. I've been, working on my own system for all of this, building my own Zettelkasten up. I probably got 20 permanent notes in there and then a whole separate project Zettelkasten built up and another 15 in there probably. And the other day I did, probably 5 or 6 of those like in a row. And then now I'm just thinking about like other project Zettelkastens to do like on specific projects, like reading Crime and Punishment for the 3rd time in a row or something, and just wanting to keep all of those notes in one place, I think is a good idea for that. But really to take the same principles over from everything I've learned here with you guys and implement it in that way still. And thinking about doing it for poetry, though I haven't written really very much poetry in the past year. Been kind of taking a break on that and playing a lot of chess and getting kind of wicked with that. And so thinking about putting some kind of thing together for chess psychology. Like I don't see too many psychology books out on chess. Usually it's just tactics and everything. So I'm kind of building notes for that as well. And that's about it. So and so I'm kind of tactical technologically. So I'm really looking forward to the output aspects of things coming up in the next week or so. And I'll be kind of demoing some stuff, probably putting some videos up for you guys to show you a little Mac take, tricks and tips and stuff like that as well. So that's about it for now.
Where will you be posting those, Glenn?
You
have
I think I think I'm gonna put it on Loom, LOOM, and then I'll just post I'll probably post a link for those things on the chat room and in Twitter or something like that. Real kind of sharp little things that people should have, little tools and stuff. I think will speed things up. It might not be for everybody, but some people might appreciate it.
Yeah, I'd be interested.
Cool.
Awesome. Heather?
Thank you.
Thank you. Heather?
Hello.
Hi.
How's it going? Oh my, what am I thankful for? I just wrote some notes here. I'm super thankful for the community. It's been really cool to see what a fully formed Zettelkasten looked like. I had a vision in my head, kind of what you had showed me, but it was really neat to see what it looked like. It's really cool to see how others synthesize their thoughts in their specific language that they're using. I was just confused by your hand language, just throwing me off there. Let's see. It was really cool to meet thought leaders. I consider everyone on this call thought leaders, so it's really interesting to see how people are just processing things, why they came to Rome, because people came from so many different places. So I find that really interesting. It was really neat to benchmark my writing and ideas to kind of see how others are doing that. Book recommendations from folks, or even like your speakers are really good. Like I had this in my auntie library, so that's Kevin Kelly's book. His book Inevitable is amazing, but this one's really cool too. The guided writing to music was also really cool. I've done that for my auditing job, but I never thought to do that personally. So just having that, just kind of setting up the writing space. And then it was like this place I went to that was amazing. So I'm super thankful for that. I don't know. I guess I'm interested about taking elaborated writing to another level. You know, when you're working down it, I feel like that's amazing, but I feel like that could also be taken to another level. And I don't know what that looks like yet. So that's something I've been thinking about. I don't know. I want to pursue creating a decision-making brain or like an auditing brain. That's something I have on the horizon. I'm very much better about idea generation more than seeing things through. So that will be a challenge. I don't know if that's anything else others struggle from here as well too, based on their curiosity. So that's it.
Oh no.
Thank you, Heather. Michael?
Okay, is my microphone working today?
Yeah.
Okay, Heather, what was that? Damn you, Heather. Heather has cost me more money in the last week with her damn book list. What was that book by David Kelly? Kevin Kelly, sorry.
That one was Lucas. Yeah, Cortex
Lucas.
Mercurial.
It could
Not
be
that
me too. It was in my anti-library.
Oh, it
Not
was,
that
yes.
one. No, the other one, Heather. What was the other one?
Inevitable.
Inevitable. God.
He wrote it in 2015. He predicts tech out into the next 30 years, and he's likely to be fairly accurate. Yeah, he's very
Oh, the inevitable.
prescient. He's an incredible person.
It's like, this is just so, okay.
That's
All right.
the whole Earth guy, right? Is that?
No, Wired magazine editor. He's a really credible tech writer.
Kevin Kelly.
Kevin Kelly, so good.
Who's the guy that was with Stuart Brand with Whole Earth catalog? Wasn't that Kevin Kelly as well?
Oh, you are right. Sorry, the Whole Earth catalog. I was thinking of Eckhart Tolle. You're correct.
Same guy. Okay.
Mike, they're buying into your time, man. Here, I'm gonna start it over.
I know.
I'm gonna start it over. I'm gonna start it over.
Lucky for me, I work for impatient people, so I can speak quickly. I'll skip the preposition. Oh, thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. Okay, so you know what? So I'm actually holding off on my own personal Zettelkasten until I get through this week, and I want to go through to the end. I've been doing this producing of stuff long enough to know that there's value in going slow to go faster. So I'm actually giving myself permission to not feel rushed. And I've been blessed with having 3 conversations in the last less than a week. One was with Heather, one was with Bart, and one this afternoon was with Samantha that I think has actually really helped me figure out how I want my permanent notes to come together. Now, this is me, not how Samantha. We had a very good, it was a good headbutting session. It was good because it was not a criticism. It was just, and in looking, we were sharing each other's kind of Zettelkasten structures and stuff. And I'm going to share mine next week. But in going through with Samantha, it helped me kind of figure out how I want to engage with it going forward, how I want to ask questions, and just super high level. You may cut me off, and if you give me the hook, that's cool. So Samantha was talking about the concept of, imagine for a second, outside of the 4 walls of a church or a synagogue or a house of worship, that you go out into the woods. The very serious, very conservative people who lead religions will say that going outside of the house of worship into the woods is actually a form of idolatry. It's actually a form of you are losing your way, and you're actually kind of worshiping the tree or whatever. And some might criticize, well, it's actually the rabbis or the priests' interpretation of things. I'm not going to get into religion, obviously, but it was a fascinating conversation with Samantha Zettelkasten to say, you might be looking at this through the eyes of walking in the woods, idolatry, or environmentalism as the next form of religion. And it was a way of kind of walking through the Zettelkasten that opened my mind to, this is pretty cool. Anyway, Samantha, thank you for indulging in just having the conversation. It was very cool. So that's my interpretation of how a Zettelkasten might go. For those of you who are having, challenges with life and whatever, all I can offer is sometimes one small thing can make a difference. Do your laundry, go for a walk, talk to somebody, talk to us, write a note or whatever. You're not alone. I'm not offering any kind of whatever salvation, but sometimes one small thing, going from 1% yogurt to 2% yogurt, can make a big deal. That may seem trivial unless you've been working with a daughter who has an eating disorder. So all I can say is one small thing. Give yourself permission for one small thing. And what's the last thing? Okay, I just finished watching the Meghan and Harry interview with Oprah. I'm sorry, it's none of my business. You can do what you want. Oh my God. Okay, we all had some tears. It was very real. You may love, you may be a hater, but anyway, holy cow. It was an eye opener for like, wow, there's some we all need to kind of get along together. I know this is way more, Bo, than what you asked for, but this is where I'm at right now, buddy. This is happy Monday, everybody. This is me.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Michael.
It sounds like Michael finally got some sleep.
Can we hear from Min? Hi. Hello? How about Omar?
Hi.
Yes.
After our meeting, I continue working in my personal service custom. I modify my workflow with your comments. I try to move all on the same level, but because I continue committing the mistake of make a child of the relevant nodes.
Yeah.
That's what I almost never find any comment in my personal server custom. That's what very useful comment for me. And the other thing is continue working with my habits. Today I make 2 notes that I put in the daily page, and that's my goal for now. Continue working on that and discover what functions for me and what doesn't. one more minute. And how more? Another thing, I continue growing my graveyard, but now I'm working with the breeding notes. I working more comment on the breeding notes. That's a way to not forget what I put that node in the system. That's what happened when I started to the capture page. For me, it's very difficult because I need to work hard, and for me, thinking is the worst part of the taking notes. I always trying to make it perfect, and for me, it's a very bad habit. I'm working in that, and thank you all because you are inspiring me for make good things. That's all, man.
Thank you, Omar. By the way, Omar, your structure is phenomenal. You got this mechanics. You got the mechanics. I think you're ready to start building your own personal Zettelkasten. So just wanted to let you know.
Okay, thanks, man.
Roy?
Yeah, I think there are a few things. First of all, you know, the community has been terrific. It's so great to find another group of or other sort of very curious-minded people. I think, Bo, sort of very grateful that you took something that still felt pretty abstract after reading Sanka's book the first time and made it feel more tangible to me. I think the fact that it wasn't linear was very difficult for me to conceptualize and to cognitively rotate and do orthogonal imagination, whatever all the words are that I didn't even understand when I heard people reference them. But you've kind of brought that to life, and it kind of reminds you, and the structure is just such a powerful tool. I mean, I remember I was an accounting major in undergrad, and the very first thing you learn in accounting is assets minus liabilities equals owner's equity. It's the simplest principle of accounting. And it's amazing when you get to 500 level classes and there's some really complex thing and you're trying to figure out how to treat a really complex transaction, how often just stopping and thinking, okay, is this an asset? Is this a liability? Is this owner's equity? And or what's it most like and how would you relate it, can save you from really complicated problems. And this structure, to me, the structure of what you've done with the blocks and the way you've connected the blocks is really, really powerful. So I've started trying to work on a Zettelkasten, my personal Zettelkasten for the more durable stuff, and then try to figure out what I can extract from what you've done to even more simply, in some cases where something is less, where I don't think it's yet worthy of the bigger thing, can I take some of that, simplify that structure further for something that's temporary? And it solved a couple of interesting problems. I think I've always thought that sort of having 6 or 8 topics that I was interested at the same time was some sort of curse. And the Zettelkasten actually shows you that's in fact a blessing, because you reason by analogy, they cross over all the stuff we all know about the Zettelkasten. But I think it also creates something durable. And often I believed in the past that I was just sort of always thought the next idea was the best idea. And so I was chasing that and abandoning everything before. What the Zettelkasten does is create a durable mechanism for you to realize there's probably a reason you wanted that new book. And it's also sort of let me off the hook. And I may not need everything that's in that book. I may need one important idea from that book, and it all does fit together of a piece. So that's a little theoretical and abstract, I guess, compared to the way other people have shared, but it has really tied together some things and sort of given me a couple of tools to sort of not kick my own ass on some of that and just embrace it as a useful way to ride the wave of my mind.
I love it. I love it. Test it. Test it. I love it. Test the durability. I fucking love that shit. Samantha. Hi.
Hey, everyone. So I was just thinking while you were all talking, I feel kind of like we're in this bird's nest together, and Bo's been our little feeding parent, bringing all the little worms to us. And we're all like the little birds going, okay, we just trust you. We have no idea what's out in that big bad world, but we know you got us. And I feel like, especially this last week, it's like, you're just like, okay, it's time to get out of the nest now. And we're kind of jumping out and we're all in the tree, in different areas of the tree, and get the hell out of the nest. Yeah, for sure. And I feel like this, especially today, able to like get out and fly a little and then to kind of come back. And I feel like I'm really close to just being able to just soar from here and just seeing everyone do that too. So yeah, I started my permanent notes, and it was really exciting because I probably have 1,000 fleeting notes that I've done over a lot of years, but they're all just sitting in sticky notes and all over in apps. And I started just getting really excited about finishing my notes. So on Sunday, I had 3 completely separate inspirations of ideas, and I did the process with every single one from start to finish. It helped having an accountability partner because I knew that I was going to be meeting with Michael. So then I finished them. I didn't leave any of them loose. It took me a day and a half to finish them all. And I felt so sad. I went for a walk today and I came back and I was like, I didn't feel like I had any loose ends with the notes. I could literally go, those thoughts are finished. They're all ready to go. I can use them. And I worded them in a way that I know I could just reuse it. So like if I wanted to pitch a small idea or summary, I pretty much could just take my permanent note and say, this is the synopsis in a really quick nutshell. Do you want to talk more about it? But also I see it as something like, I have a lot of conversations with diverse types of people. And so I could easily, during a coffee talk or whatever, just whip that up so fast and like literally have a very concise written, well thought out statement. And then just the fleeting notes if the conversation goes further. Because sometimes you're having a conversation, you're like, wait a minute, I have quite a bit of thoughts on that. And I've processed them already, and just the ability to just quick go grab them. Or when you're putting a paper together or some sort of, I'm going to be starting a blog soon, and the ability to just go in and go, just be able to grab pieces, and they're pretty much finished. They don't need a lot of work. So that was really, I just felt like this whole thing was off of me, and I was so excited. Like, I think I was more excited getting those 3 done than I have been, other than doing the guided writing. I was pretty excited about some of those. So just having them fleshed out was a big release, and the community has been, yeah, really amazing. It's funny because when I hear gamers talk about online relationships and how close they get, I'd be like, yeah, whatever. Bunch of teeny boppers don't know what a real relationship is. My husband and I were talking, and like, Yeah, I kind of think I get that now. You get every relationship online. So to all the teeny boppers out there that I judged on you in quiet, you totally were onto something. It's real. And thank all of you who've been plugging in and giving me ideas. So I did do something that we'll see what happens. I did 2 permanent notes in one Zettelkasten because they were for different purposes. I know Michael's going, what? I did it and it works. I think it works. I think it works. And I even tried a Twitter as my 3rd permanent note, and I'm going to see if that works. So I'm like already breaking the rules. So we'll see how it works. So if a week, I might be like regretting it, but I did it in a way that I can quick find it and delete if it doesn't work out.
Heresy.
I say do it. No, do it. That's what you're supposed to do. Don't trust me. Go out there and do it.
Well, the cool thing about making one of your permanent notes or like nested, putting it right under in a Twitter is it makes you frame it in a different way again. And then I feel like there's an extra purpose to doing all the work if I could create a Twitter post with it at the same time. So then it even feels more satisfying.
I almost feel like that's what Naval's tweets are. Naval's tweets are almost like that's the permanent note, but then the article is all of the abstractions, the fleeting and literature notes. Vincent, last but not least.
Hey there. Am I good?
Yes.
Okay. I guess I just want to say thanks to the group for being great. I've showed up. Wow, I think I've showed up every time for this reading room because I can't make it to the live session because I'm in Matt B's book club as well. But I watch the videos and they're great. And I think I'm mostly caught up. I added 1 permanent note to the group Zettelkasten last week. It was I know, but it's like number 1, just 1. It was on stories shaping reality because they shape our perception and they kind of motivate our action. So I think I'm starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I can see where the power is. I think I've been fairly convinced for a while, but some of this stuff you can know the information, but you can't understand it until you actually do it. So a lot of these past couple of weeks was learning by doing, and I thought it was a great way to learn. I think right now I'm trying to kind of merge that with some of my existing practices. Like sometimes when I read books right now, I'll take literature and fleeting notes inside the Kindle app as I'm reading. And with books, oftentimes you have only maybe like a handful of main ideas, like maybe like 10, 20 main ideas. And what I like to do is that I'll take literature notes and at the end, I'll kind of come up with these overarching ideas. And some people call them Zettels, I guess. And I'll block reference a bunch of literature notes to support that. So it's like one book, maybe like 10 main ideas and a bunch of literature notes and fleeting notes to support that. So that's the way I've been doing it, to kind of distill a book or abstract it up until a couple ideas. So I'm trying to merge that with the structure that Bo's teaching, which is super powerful. And I guess like an idea I have right now is maybe, so right now Bo's structure is relevant notes, permanent notes, and then he's got the tripod with reference notes, literature notes, and fleeting notes. And I'm wondering if I can add one layer below permanent notes. So it'd be like permanent notes, and it would have, I guess I'd call it a zettel, or like a overarching idea or statement. And underneath that, I would have multiple tripods that kind of all support that one zettel. And with that zettel, I can form multiple permanent notes in how they connect or converse with my Zettelkasten. So that's like one way I'm trying to merge these two, but I don't know, we'll see. How much time do I have? Okay. Well, yeah, that's all I got then. Thanks all.
So we spent an hour doing that, but I feel like that to me is like what this is all about. I mean, we touched upon so much. I mean, I learned so much more about everyone here. And yeah, such a powerful thing. I'm gonna go and share the screen. And I suppose we ought to read a little in a reading room, right? Do we have a list, by the way? Let's see. Well, look at that. I don't really want to read right now. Can I strike my name out?
I always forget to put myself on the list.
Okay. Well, how about that? Was that Curtis? Was that Curtis?
Oh yeah, this is Curtis.
Okay. Well, you're gonna read first then.
Oh, okay. Where we're starting?
Right here.
Chapter 11.
Yeah, chapter 11, second paragraph or second block. Make this wider.
Okay. So second block, I use the real book, so it should start off with the technique. No.
Experienced academic readers. What the hell is going on?
Got it. Okay, here we go. Experienced academic readers usually read a text with questions in mind and try to relate it to other possible approaches, while inexperienced readers tend to adopt the question of a text and the frames of the argument and take it as a given. What good readers can do is spot the limitations of a particular approach and see what is not mentioned in the text. Even more problematic than staying within the given frame of a text or an argument is the inability to interpret particular information in the text within the bigger frame or argument of the text. Even doctoral students sometimes just collect decontextualized quotes from the text, probably the worst possible approach to research imaginable. This makes it almost impossible to understand the actual meaning of information. Without understanding information within its context, it is also impossible to go beyond it, to reframe it, and to think about what it could mean for another question. Jerome Bruner, a psychologist Lanka refers to, goes a step further and says that scientific thinking is plainly impossible if we can't manage to think beyond a given context and we only focus on the information as it is given to us. It is not surprising, therefore, that Lanka recommends what Luhmann recommends, writing brief accounts on the main ideas of a text instead of collecting quotes. And she also stresses that it is no less important to do something with these ideas, to think hard about how they connect with other ideas from different contexts and could inform questions that are not already the questions of the author of the respective text. This is exactly what we do when we take the next step, in which we write and add permanent notes to the slip box. We don't just play with ideas in our heads, but do something with them in a very concrete way. We think about what they mean for other lines of thought. Then we write this explicitly on paper and connect them literally with other notes. That's probably a good stopping place.
Rick?
I think there's a muting issue.
Unmute. You got to unmute.
Yeah, okay, sorry. I was trying to be courteous to Curtis, and that's what you get. Now I just have to get my chat window out of the way. And okay, here we go. The first time one faces the challenge of writing a long text, say a dissertation, it is pretty normal to feel intimidated by the perspective of filling a few hundred pages with well-conceived ideas, source-based research, and correct references on every page. If you don't feel some kind of respect for this task, there is something wrong with you. On the other hand, most people feel that writing a page a day and having a day a week off is quite manageable, not realizing that this would mean finishing a doctoral thesis within a year, something that does not happen very often in reality. The technique of writing a certain amount every day was perfected by Anthony Trollope, one of the most popular and productive authors of the 19th century. He would start every morning at 5:30 a.m. with a cup of coffee and a clock in front of him. Then he would write at least 250 words every 15 minutes. This, he writes in his autobiography, allowed me to produce over 10 pages of an ordinary novel volume a day. And if kept up through 10 months, would have given as its results 3 novels of 3 volumes each in the year. And that, mind you, was before breakfast. Yikes. Academic or nonfiction texts are not written like this because in addition to the writing, there's the reading, the research, the thinking, and the tinkering with ideas. And they almost always take significantly more time than expected. If you ask academic or nonfiction writers, students or professors how much time they expect it would take them to finish a text, they systematically underestimate the time they would need, even when they are asked to estimate the time under the worst case scenario, and if the real conditions turned out to be quite favorable. On top of that, half of all doctoral theses would stay unfinished forever. Academic and nonfiction writing is not as predictable as a Trollope novel, and the work it involves certainly can't be broken down to something like 1 page a day.
I have a question. Why do you think he says that? Just to the group. Why do you think he says that, you know, academic or nonfiction texts are not like writing like novels where it's like, I'm going to write 250 words right now?
I mean, a novel can just come from your imagination, whereas the academic text, you're building on top of other, you know, knowledge and adding to, especially in a doctoral thesis. I mean, you don't just pull things out of your butt. I mean, you have to back everything up, you know, with the knowledge that comes before it, you know, the proof that you're building on top of.
You also have to fill in the holes that are missing. So if you come across an area that you're unfamiliar with or feel like you need more research, and then you find out that you really need to know more about it, that can take quite some time.
Is everyone starting to feel like that weight of the blank page lifting? Yeah. David, I see you nod your head. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Rick, yeah. Cool. Okay.
Vincent? Actually, I have a quick question for Vincent on the, when you're talking about, were you kind of talking about creating a Zettel within a Zettel? Did I understand that right? Is that kind of, you doing like a meta Zettel or what?
I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to work out my process, and you know, I've gotten so many good ideas from, you know, the different book clubs, and just trying to kind of merge everything. I think for me, I just like to have these, I like to extract these overarching ideas, just a couple from a book, and have them be supported by you know, various literature notes and fleeting notes, because I feel like typically an author only has maybe like 10, 15, 20 main ideas in a book. And he says those ideas or tries to explain them at multiple points in a book. So, you know, I like to tie that main idea and have it connected by all this support. And sometimes if I just take one quote, do literature fleeting notes and make a permanent note, as I read, I'll come across something else that will kind of lead me down the same path. So rather than going through this serial process multiple times, I kind of like to group these different sections of the book and kind of have them all converge onto a main idea. And then, do Bo's process on that main idea, have several tripods and maybe add some fleeting notes. And with that Zettel or overarching idea or whatever you might call it, that can be a permanent note, or it can be multiple permanent notes depending on how I want to connect it to the conversation in the Zettelcast. Does that make sense, Rick?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I was thinking about that earlier today. So are you basically a similar concept? Are you basically saying you'll just have multiple layers of supporting references and then associated literature notes, associated fleeting notes that all are the underlying support for a given permanent note? Is that basically what you're getting at?
Yeah, it's something like this. I haven't tried to implement it exactly yet, but in my head, the idea would be similar to Bo's structure, where he has relevant notes. Reference notes, permanent notes. But instead of going directly into the tripod, I would have, the Zettel or the overarching idea or statement. And below that, I would have multiple tripods that kind of all feed into that all support it. Does that kind of make sense?
I think that makes perfect sense. And I think that's completely congruent with the structure, actually. I don't know about what anybody else thinks, but it seems like a very congruent concept to me.
I think there's play in all of that. I think, yeah, there's play in all that. My only suggestion would be remembering that, the main purpose of the Zettelkasten is that sort of communication partner. And it's, my only concern is that when you have all these different voices leading up to one crystallized permanent note, is that it causes a little dissonance, instead of having this clear, like, here's an idea, one note, one idea all the way up. And then it's also remembering that it is a conversation. So it's not like we're just, the permanent note isn't getting crystallized on its own. It's actually, we don't even look at the permanent note until we look at the other permanent notes in the Zettelcast, and we write in relationship to all the other notes that are in that tree or in that branch or thread of conversation. And so and because the permanent note can literally live anywhere, it's sort of allowing your interests to show you what you're interested in. So if you see threads of conversation on productivity, then obviously that's where your line of what you're thinking about. And it's that developing that sort of trust. But I'm interested to see where that goes, honestly. And I think we should jump on a call so we can figure out, like, get a video so we can track that progress over time. Because I'd like to see, like I said, after you pass the fleeting notes and literature notes phases, it's a shotgun spread of all the possibilities. There's an infinite amount of variables in regards to, what can happen. And I'm interested to see all the different techniques that people are trying out as well in order to track that over time.
Yeah, I had one example just today, though, Bo, where I originally was pretty resistant to your notion of making a permanent note as you go, because I thought, well, I need to wait and make sure. But the other day I made a permanent note about something, and I was reading a second book by the same author, and I started to make a permanent note. And when I went to connect it, I realized, oh, I had missed a really important piece of information, because the notes at first looked like they conflicted, right? Or what I thought I was going to make the note. But when I looked at the previous note and I realized what I had missed, it caused me to rewrite the new note based on the missed connection. So that discipline.
Can you show what that looks like? I'd love to just get a concrete example if you could, or
not easily,
okay,
but I could describe it. It was an author on sort of writing theory,
yeah.
And he had emphasized that something was the most common pattern that was in, but I had missed that he had created a tree that I had missed. And I didn't realize I was down this branch, and I was trying to make it the top point. And so the idea wasn't wrong. It was just incomplete. And by seeing what I had previously accepted as what I understood, it made it obvious that I had missed something.
Yeah.
Um,
Did that scare you at all?
No, it was actually kind of a relief because it was like I mean, it's the reason I think that I have often had to go back and reread things in the past is because I do a superficial reading. I don't run it to ground. And then, it's only when I then try to apply the thought. It's the written example of the idea of, you don't know if you have it until you try and repeat it back, right? It feels familiar. And essentially, I was trying to repeat the idea back to myself, but had written evidence of what I'd said before and saw the gap.
Yeah. And the reason I asked if it was scary, because I mean, it's literally seeing you, that's the reflection. I mean, yeah. I mean,
May I comment on Vincent? When you were talking, I wondered right away, I got on the Christian thing today, but like it sort of made me think about trying to summarize the Bible in one overarching sentence, which you could do. I mean, we have like the overarching story, and then we have mini stories. The Old Testament has one, the New Testament has one, and then each of the kind of Gospels have one. And I'm like, to try to put all of those tripods together for one overarching. And I'm saying that that's like an extreme case, but that was the image I got right away when you started talking about taking all of these individual tripods to create one overarching. I wonder, like, if you brought that down smaller, the overarching would just kind of come out on its own once you get all of your little zettles together. So I don't know. It's kind of like, to me, it's like me when I used to teach Bible studies, trying to teach the overarching theme of the Bible without anybody knowing what all the details are in the middle. I guess you could tell people, but then you've already discovered it because you did all the little stuff in between, or like before that, I guess. I don't know if that's a good way to explain it, but it's just something that came to mind while you were talking.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, the idea, just to piggyback on that, it's like the overarching is almost shallower compared to sort of all the little bits that make that up with the depth.
They're all important. However, it's like you're trying to get to the whole thing without doing the work. Well, you are doing the work, but anyway, for me, I think I just get overwhelmed. Like today, when I closed when I closed it, I was like, I'm done that. So there was like something about being done it, and I can go back and adjust it for the wording if I really want to, but it's good the way it is. Whereas if I had tried to put all my ideas into one, I probably wouldn't be done right now. And I'd be like, shit, I got to go back on there tonight and I got to try to finish that, but I'm tired. So I probably wouldn't finish it.
Digested. It's been digested.
Yeah, those are great points. I'm actually glad I brought that up. And yeah, everyone has made really valid points. Thank you.
I wanted to say one more thing on that from my use of using the Zettelkasten in like very substantially on a theological basis. I mean, if your overall permanent note doesn't have a myriad of supporting references, well, then it really doesn't pass much theological muster to begin with. So in the sense, every permanent note from a theological perspective should actually almost mandates a multi-tiered support.
Vincent, I actually think you probably are the overarching story yourself. As a person, your overarching personality is going to come out no matter what. You don't have to define it.
Whoa! This is being recorded. That one was, whoa. Ooh, man. That's the bingo.
Mind blown.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like this is a therapy session for me now.
You guys are all intervention. It's a top-down intervention.
I'll send you my consulting fee later and then just put 0 on the bottom.
Please do.
We'll keep going. Vincent, I think you're up. Yeah.
Yeah. It does make sense to break down the work into manageable and measurable steps, but pages per day don't work that well as a unit when you also have to read, do research, and think. But even though academic and nonfiction writing involve more of other types of work than fiction writing, Luhmann managed to beat Trollope in productivity if you count his articles as well as his books. Luhmann wrote 58 books and hundreds of articles, while Trollope wrote 47 novels plus 16 other books. Granted, it might have something to do with the fact that Luhmann did some work after breakfast as well. But the main reason is the slip box, which compares to Trollope's technique as investing with compounded interest compares to a piggy bank. Trollope is like a diligent saver who puts a little sum to the side every day, which adds up over time towards something impressive. $3 put aside each day, say one takeout coffee, add up over the year to a small vacation, $1,000, and over a working life to deposit on a flat as a permanent holiday retreat. Putting notes into the slip box, however, is like investing and reaping the rewards of compounded interest, which would, in this example, almost pay for the whole flat. And likewise, the sum of the slip box content is worth much more than the sum of the notes. More notes mean more possible connections, more ideas, more synergy between different projects, and therefore a much higher degree of productivity. Luhmann's slip box contains about 90,000 notes, which sounds like an incredible large number, but it only means that he wrote 6 notes a day from the day he started to work with the slip box until he died. If you, by any chance, don't have the ambition to compete with him in terms of books per year, you could settle for 3 notes a day and still build up a significant critical mass of ideas in a very reasonable time. And you could settle for less than 1 book every 12 months. In contrast to manuscript pages per day, a certain number of notes a day is a reasonable goal for academic writing. And that is because taking a note and sorting it into the slip box can be done in one go, while writing a manuscript page could involve weeks and months of preparation involving other tasks as well. You could therefore measure your daily productivity by the number of notes written.
Can I just add something to this? Is you have to remember that in the physical slip box, you were limited to these 3x5 index notes. And in those index notes, like Luhmann wouldn't have more than 2 or 3 relevant notes that would connect to other notes, right? That's one aspect of what we're doing is more granular, right? And then also his fleeting notes were thrown away, you know? And if you think about that, that means, sure, he wrote 6 permanent notes a day, but the abstraction process that we're doing is not being thrown away, it's nested underneath. So in essence, when you're doing 1 permanent note, it's actually more like 20 permanent notes, if you think about it. And you're sort of support, and remember, Luhmann sometimes didn't have references. He just would write, he would have a fleeting idea and he would put it into his permanent notes or into his Zettelkasten. So what may seem like a long, arduous task of doing 1 permanent note, in essence, because of how things are nested and because of the power of Rome, not only are they they're exponentially more connected to all the other notes, all the abstractions in the fleeting and literature note phases are also essentially permanent notes. So it's just something to think about. Vincent, Heather? Vincent, are you passing?
Yeah, I'll pass it to Heather.
No. Taking literature notes is a form of deliberate practice as it gives us feedback on our understanding or lack of it, while the effort to put into our own words the gist of something is at the same time the best approach to understanding what we read. Taking permanent notes of our own thoughts is a form of self-testing as well. Do they still make sense in writing? Are we even able to get the thought on paper? Do we have the references, facts, and supporting sources at hand? And at the same time, writing is the best way to get our thoughts in order. Writing here, too, is not copying, but translating from one context and from one medium into another. No written piece is ever a copy of a thought in our mind. When we take permanent notes, it is much more a form of thinking within the medium of writing and in dialogue with the already existing notes within the slip box and a protocol of preconceived ideas. Any thought of a certain complexity requires writing. Coherent arguments require the language to be fixed, and only if something is written down is it fixed enough to be discussed independently from the author. The brain alone is too eager to make us feel good, even it is by politely ignoring inconsistencies in her thinking. Only in the written form can an argument be looked at with a certain distance, literally. We need this distance to think about an argument, otherwise the argument itself would occupy the very mental resources we need for scrutinizing it. I'll pass.
As we write notes with an eye towards existing notes, we take more into account than the information that is already available in our internal memory. That is extremely important because the internal memory retrieves information not in the rational or logical way, but according to psychological rules. The brain also doesn't store information neurally and objectively. We reinvent and rewrite our memory every time we try to retrieve information. The brain works with rules of thumb and makes things look as if they fit, even if they don't. It remembers events that never happened, connects unrelated episodes to convincing narratives, and completes incomplete images. It cannot help but see patterns and meaning everywhere, even in the most random things. The brain, as Kahneman writes, is a machine for jumping to conclusions. And a machine that is designed for jumping to conclusions is not the kind of machine you want to rely on when it comes to the facts and rationality. At least you would want to counterbalance it. Luhmann states as clearly as possible, it's not possible to think systematically without writing. Most people still think about thinking as a purely internal process and believe that the only function of the pen is to put finished thoughts on paper. Richard Feynman once had a visitor in his office, a historian who wanted to interview him. When he spotted Feynman's notebooks, he said how delighted he was to see such wonderful records of Feynman's men's thinking. No, Feynman protested. They aren't a record of my thinking processes. They are my thinking process. I actually did the work on paper. Well, the historian said, the work was done in your head, but the record of it is still here. No, it's not a record, not really. It's working. You have to work on paper, and this is the paper. This obviously was a very important distinction to Feynman, much more than just a linguistic difference. And for a reason, it is the distinction that makes all the difference when it comes to thinking. Just for two things that popped in my mind. First of all, when it talked about like filling in the blanks, it just reminds me of why like children especially shouldn't watch inappropriate television, because they can't process what's real and what's not. So their brain might think that something they watched on TV actually happened to them. But as adults, that can happen to us too in many ways. I mean, if you think back like 1,000 years ago, they didn't have TV. So anything you saw was something that happened to you, but we still see things but think they happened. We have to tell our brain, no, this isn't real and this is. There was no such thing as non-real before television and radio. So it just made me think a bit about that wasn't the way the brain was set up to constantly go, this is real and this isn't. Everything was just real. And then also just going into this thinking process, it reminded me of when I did my master's, that when I wrote, it was this huge epiphany that when you started writing, I would start writing. And then I was like, it's like you are on the paper, who you are and the essence of you is like comes out and it's on that paper. But as you're writing and processing, it's like this reciprocated and it comes back onto you. And then the paper and the process becomes a part of you. And so you're synchronized in a way with the writing process and everything that you've processed, everything that you've done in the writing process and coming back through you into future writing. So it just kind of reminds me of how that how the reciprocated processing goes in and out. I don't know if you call it reciprocated.
I don't think that's true, Samantha, that there wasn't such a thing as fiction or unreality, until TV or, modern media. Storytelling goes way, way back. I mean, I think it's.
But you didn't see it, you would hear it. And so I guess you're right. That's true. I was like, there was no real or unreal, but I suppose it was what you visually saw was real. I guess a dream would be unreal.
I mean, you know, there are dreams, there are your imagination, you know, through story.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how important.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking, like, I have a 65-inch TV that looks like real life. I mean, the people are like at your level. So if a child is watching it, you know, how do they really? It's harder to tell the difference anymore. What's real and what's not.
Yeah,
that's a good pushback on that. Thanks.
You can always count on Rick for some pushback.
Look at Greek mythology, right? You take a look at Greek mythology. I don't think Greeks necessarily believed in all those gods. I think that they used them to tell stories and to tell morality tales, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. All right, well, I take some of that back, part of it back. All right, hallucinations. Oh, I'm just getting slammed in the chat, man. Oh, man. Thank you, everyone. I think I need a glass of wine right now.
A nice glass of salsa.
Actually, maybe it's the wine that was the problem to begin with. David's laughing. All right, I'm good. We're good for some entertainment. David, you're up next.
Yay. Philosophers, neuroscientists, educators, and psychologists like to disagree in many different aspects on how the brain works, but they no longer disagree when it comes to the need for external scaffolding. Almost all agree nowadays that real thinking requires some kind of externalization, especially in the form of writing. Notes on paper or on a computer screen do not make contemporary physics or other kinds of intellectual endeavors easier. They make it possible, is one of the key takeaways in a contemporary handbook of neuroscientists. Concluding the discussions in this book, Levy writes, in any case, no matter how internal processes, where did it go? In any case, no matter how they are implemented, no matter how internal processes are implemented, insofar as thinkers are genuinely concerned with what enables human beings to perform the spectacular intellectual feats exhibited in science and other areas of systematic inquiry, as well as in the arts, they need to understand the extent to which the mind is reliant upon external scaffolding. Hey, that sounds familiar. In our system, the scaffolding is done explicitly by connecting the thoughts within the external memory of the slipbox. Luhmann writes, somehow one has to mark differences, keep track of distinctions, either explicitly or implicitly in concepts, because only if the connections are somehow fixed externally can they function as models or theories to give meaning and continuity for further thinking. A common way to embed an idea into the context of the slipbox is by writing out the reasons of its importance for your own lines of thought. For example, I recently read the book Scarcity, Why Having Too Little Means So Much, by Mullainathan and Shafir. They investigate how the experience of scarcity has cognitive effects and causes changes in decision-making processes. They help the reader understand why people with almost no time or money sometimes do things that don't seem to make any sense to outside observers. People facing deadlines sometimes switch frantically between all kinds of tasks. People with little money sometimes spend it on seeming luxuries like takeaway food. From the outside, it would make more sense to do one thing at a time or buy food in bulk and cook for yourself. The book is interesting because the authors don't question this behavior rhetorically or even in a judgmental way, but investigate it as a universal human phenomena. Over to you, Michael.
I took some literature notes collecting reasons how and why humans act so very differently when they experience scarcity. This was step one, done with an eye towards the argument of the book. I had questions in mind like, is this convincing? What methods do they use? Which of the references are familiar? But the first question I asked myself when it came to writing the first permanent note for the slipbox was, What does this all mean for my own research and the questions I think about in my slip box? Is this just another way of asking, why did the aspects I wrote down catch my interest?
Can I stop real quick? I feel
It's gonna be big. This is gonna,
Huh?
sorry.
What are you thinking, Mike? Tell me what you're
Well,
thinking.
because you know what, like, okay, so in my chats with Samantha today, and in watching the all of the permanent notes, not in our own words, we can't traverse. I know we're not allowed to. It's the law. I get it, but this is going to evolve over time. And so right now at day 1, day 30, day 100, day 365, this concept is going to evolve a lot. We are all going to be like a year from now, this club, it's going to be so cool for those of us that are like I think most of us have no choice. Like I have no choice. I'm in. It's like when my daughter was born or my son was born, it was like, holy shit. Wow, you weren't kidding. We're having a kid. Huh? Like that's literally how I felt when our daughter was born. That's how this feels. I mean, obviously having children is more important. I'm just saying though, this is very real. Sorry.
And I'm right there. And it's just the question that I always get asked, or a lot of the pushback that I get when I talk about Zettelkasten is this part right here. It's like, they think that it's, one permanent note is, that's what it is. That, you do your fleeting notes, you do your literature notes, and you get a permanent note. But it's this part. And they go, well, what if I have a Zettel question? Or what if I have like, this or that? But it's like, where does it, what conversation do I want to continue? Where does this fit in the slip box? And it's just, yeah. So I'm just going to copy paste your little, what you just said there. And next time someone asks me that question, I'm just going to go, bam.
I keep forgetting we're recorded. I got to really dial it back.
No.
No, but here's the thing, like just to add on to what you just said, I just realized, oh, we're recorded. Huh? Okay, so I'm used to like in people in person, like I'm great in live, by the way. Like if we're all like having I know we can't all drink, but it would be so much more fun. Anyway, this is a very existential thing for a lot of us. Yes, I ran out. I've got tea. Once I'm done, I'm gonna top up. This is a very existential thing because when you are doing your own conversation, when you're doing this, the scary thing, I'm just for myself, I'm scared about this because what if I suck? What if I don't have it? Like I'm going through my own neuroses, and that's not false praise. It's just, or false humility. It's like, seriously, fuck, this better work. Cause it's either this or fucking OneNote or Word. And and that's going to suck big time to do a thesis in Word or OneNote. Anyway, it's the existential part. That's what's kind of resonating with me.
Yeah, please.
If I were a psychologist, this book would interest me for completely different reasons than if I were a politician or a debt advisor, or if I had bought it out of personal interest. As someone with a sociological perspective on political questions and an interest in the project of a theory in the project of a theory of society, my first note reads plainly, any comprehensive analysis of social inequality must include the cognitive effects of scarcity. This immediately triggers further questions, which I can discuss on following notes, starting with why. Now, I already have 2 quotes in my slip box based on the literature notes I took while reading the book, but written along the lines of my own thinking. One note states the relevance of the book for my own thinking, and one explains my idea in more detail. Here I could draw from my literature notes as a source of valuable facts and insight, even though the answers to the question of why scarcity is relevant to the study of social inequality are all in the book. They are not just there to be copied. They need to be made explicit. That means to think about how the insight into cognitive effects of scarcity affect the analysis of social inequality. Want me to read more, or should I pass it over?
Basically, he says right here, now I already have 2 notes in my slip box based on the literature notes I took while reading. I mean, what I hear is I heard 1 literature notes with 2 permanent notes.
There you go, Samantha.
Could you repeat that, please?
Now I already have 2 notes in my slip box based on the literature notes I took while reading the book.
So he took 2 permanent notes. That's what I did today. Actually 3 if you include my Twitter run at. And I think it worked. And Michael and I were hashing it out today and he's like, I don't think it's gonna work. I don't think it's gonna work. And then I did it and I think it worked.
I just
what I
don't-
liked
yeah,
about
I
it is
just-
I could frame them differently for different conversations. And that's the part like that Beverly and I were talking about, that the permanent notes were, everything else was all the same. I just wanted the permanent note to just be framed differently so that when I reuse it, I don't have to change the wording for it because I already kind of know what future conversation I may want to have with it. So that I'm done it. I don't have to think about, I need to reframe that for this other application. And it's all in one Zettel, not in separate Zettels.
I just much prefer telling people just to do one-to-one relationship all the way up.
Okay, for everybody who's in the
Bill,
Rome Book Club,
well,
don't do it till after you're done Bo's class.
Oh, I was arguing in your favor because that's what I think. We had a hour and a half. We got into it.
But you have to understand why too, though, because you're literally breaking apart someone's higher resolution certainties of their identity. And if you do that, there's a harsh response that always happens. It's like saying you're a bad person. It's like you don't like how you're thinking is wrong. How you're taking notes is wrong. It's like, what? Shut up. You know? And so the only way to sort of mitigate that problem or to sort of ease people into this is saying, hey, here's a strict structure that you follow until you can trust in this thing. And then when you trust in it, go wild, which I've stated from the very beginning. And it's, yeah.
I'll do one more chapter and then it's and over to Beverly. While I am writing these notes, it becomes obvious that the answer to the question why has already triggered more follow-up questions like, isn't this already discussed in theories of social inequality? If yes, who discussed it? If not, why not? And where do I turn to find the answers to these questions? Correct. The first choice for further inquiry is the slip box. Maybe there's already something on social inequality that helps me answer these questions, or at least an indication of where to look. Where to look. All right, Beverly, over to you.
By skimming through the slip box, I might discover that these ideas also could be helpful for another topic I haven't thought about. That's where this gets me. One example is the question of personal responsibility, which is discussed on the example of obesity and the influence of hormones as a subtopic to a philosophical discussion on free will. None of it needs to be discussed right away, especially as most of these ideas would require more research and reading. But there is also no reason not to write down these possible connections and come back to them later if my research points me back to them. The more notes the slip box contains, the more interesting and prolific this step will become, and the more research questions will be triggered. Just by writing down these questions and making possible connections explicit in writing are the concepts and theories being investigated. Their limitations become as visible as their particular angle on a problem. By explicitly writing down how something connects or leads to something else, we force ourselves to clarify and distinguish ideas from each other. Roy, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sorry. Selection is the very keel on which our mental ship is built. And in this case of memory, its utility is obvious. If we remembered everything, we should on most occasions be as ill off as if we remembered nothing. It would take as long for us to recall a space of time as it took the original time to elapse, and we should never get ahead with our thinking. We have seen in the first step that elaboration through taking smart literature notes increases the likelihood that we will remember what we read in the long term. But this was only the first step. Transferring those ideas into the network of our own thoughts, our lattice work of theories, concepts, and mental models in the slip box brings our thinking to the next level. Now we elaborate these ideas within different contexts and connect them with other ideas in a durable fashion. The literature notes are going to be archived, which means the ideas would be lost in the reference system if we didn't do something with them. That is why we transfer them into our external memory, the slip box, with which we have an ongoing dialogue and where they can become part of our active set of ideas. Transferring ideas into the external memory also allows us to forget them. And even though it sounds paradoxical, forgetting actually facilitates long-term learning. It is important to understand why, because there are still many students who shy away from using an external memory. They fear that they would have to choose between remembering things in their heads, which wouldn't require an external memory, or in the external memory, which would then be forgotten in the internal memory. That is a false choice because this is a false choice becomes obvious as soon as we understand how our memory truly works. To be able to remember everything and not having to resort to any external memory sounds great initially, but you might think differently if you're familiar with the story of a man who was really able to remember almost everything. The reporter, Solomon Shereshevsky, is one of the most famous figures in the history of psychology. When his supervisor saw that he didn't take any notes during their meetings, he first doubted Shereshevsky's dedication to the job, but shortly after it was rather his own sanity that he doubted. Chris?
Yep. Okay. When he confronted Shereshevsky with, somebody saying something? Go ahead, Rick.
I'm sorry, Chris. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was just intrigued by this. Anybody familiar with Borges, the Borges story, Funes, the Memorias, In Memorias? It's a fictional short story about a character that was unable to forget anything. I mean, it plays right into that William James quote and what this is about, and how it's yeah. So I'd recommend the story. It's a great story.
You put that in the
Yeah.
chat.
And you're not gonna like explain it to us? Like you're gonna make us do the work?
All right, let's go on. All right, when he confronted Shereshevsky with what seemed to him like lazy behavior, Shereshevsky started to recount every single word that was spoken during the meeting and continued to recount verbatim all the meetings they had ever had. His colleagues were astonished, but the person most astonished was Shereshevsky himself. It was the first time he realized that everyone else seemed to have forgotten almost everything. Even those who had taken notes couldn't remember even a fraction of what seemed normal for him. Alexander Romanovich Luria, the psychologist who subsequently tested him in all conceivable ways, couldn't find any of the usual restrictions people normally have in their memories. It also became clear that this advantage came at a huge cost. It wasn't just that Shereshevsky was able to remember so much, he had trouble forgetting anything. The important things got lost under a pile of irrelevant details that involuntarily came to his mind. Although he was very good at remembering facts, Shereshevsky was almost incapable of getting the gist of something, the concepts behind the particulars, and distinguishing relevant facts from minor details. He had great trouble relating to literature or poetry. He could repeat a novel word by word, but the greater meaning would be lost on him. While Romeo and Juliet is for most of us a story of love and tragedy, for him it would be the story of two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene, from ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. It should be obvious that for academic thinking and writing, the gift of being able to remember everything is a serious liability. The science of learning is still undecided on the question of whether we all share Shereshevsky's ability to memorize virtually everything we've ever encountered, but are only better at suppressing it. After all, sometimes we suddenly remember scenes from the past in great detail, triggered by a cue like the scent of a Madeleine in Proust's research. Sorry. These moments of involuntary memory might be like small cracks in the mental barrier through which we can catch a glimpse of all the memories we've collected over our lifetimes, but we might never again have access to. I'll do one more and then I'll hand it over to you. Forgetting then would not be the loss of a memory, but the erection of a mental barrier between the conscious mind and our long-term memory. Psychologists call this mechanism active inhibition. It is easy to understand what it is good for. Without a very thorough filter, our brains would be constantly be flooded by memories, making it impossible to focus on anything in our surroundings. That is what Shereshevsky struggled with in his life. There were moments where he tried to buy an ice cream, but some random word of the vendor triggered such an enormous amount of associations and memories that he would have to leave the shop. So overwhelming was this experience. Matt, are you able to join the next?
Antoinette.
Didn't hear it right. Where are we? Share. We I'm so sorry, I'm lost po.
11.3, chapter 11.3, right in the middle. We are very
We
dependent.
are very. Ah, yes. Yes, po. We are very dependent on a subconscious mechanism that reliably inhibits almost every memory, every moment except the very, very few that are truly helpful in a situation. Unfortunately, we cannot just consciously pluck from our memory what we need, like from a folder in an archive. That would require the memory we can choose from to be already in our conscious mind, which would render the mechanism of remembering redundant. Remembering is the very mechanism to bring a memory back into our conscious mind. Therefore, Shereshevsky might not have had an ability most of us do not possess, but lack an ability we all possess. The ability to forget systematically, to inhibit most irrelevant information from being remembered. Oh, it's raining. Shereshevsky was still capable of inhibiting information, but even being much less fine-tuned can have serious consequences. Being too often overwhelmed by memories, associations, and synesthetic experiences made it difficult for him to stay in a job and enjoy many of the things we highly value. Above all, it made it almost impossible for him to think in abstract terms. Robert and Elizabeth Ligon Jort from the University of California suggest distinguishing between two different measurements when it comes to memory: storage strength and retrieval strength. They speculate that storage strength, the ability to store memories, only becomes greater over one's lifetime. We add more and more information to our long-term memory. Just by looking at the physical capacity of our brains, we can see that we could indeed probably store a lifetime and a bit of detailed experiences in it. That's all.
Back to you, Curtis. 11.3. It is difficult, if not impossible. Oh, unmute. Sorry. Unmute.
Okay, I think we're unmuted now.
There you go. Yes.
Okay, 11.3. Let's see. What's it start with? I apologize. I'm getting caught up here.
It is difficult.
Let me just go with the. I'll just go with the main I'm just going to go with the main book instead of my book. Okay. It is difficult, if not impossible, to verify this claim, but it does make sense to shift the attention from storage strength to retrieval strength. Learning would be not so much about saving information like on a hard disk, but about building connections and bridges between pieces of information to circumvent the inhibition mechanism in the right moment. It is about making sure that the right cues trigger the right memory, about how we think strategically to remember the most useful information when we need it. This is far from self-evident. If we look at the current state of education, especially the learning strategies most students employ, we see that the vast majority of all learning still aims to improve storage strength, even though it cannot be improved. It is still mostly about remembering isolated facts, not so much about building connections. This is what learning psychologists have rightfully given the derogative term cramming, the attempt to reinforce and solidify information in the brain by repetition. It is basically hammering facts into the brain as if they were carvings on an ancient stone tablet. Using fancy words and describing it as a strengthening of the connections between neurons does not change the fact that this attempt is futile. If we instead focus on retrieval strength, we instantly start to think strategically about what kind of cues should trigger the retrieval of a memory. There are no natural cues. Every piece of information can become the trigger for another piece of information. These can be associations like the scent of a sweet, as the Madeline triggered childhood memories of Proust. But this kind of flashback is called involuntary memory for a reason. We can't retrieve it on purpose. Then there are the accidental cues that become attached to information when we learn something in a particular environment. It is, for example, easier to remember something we have learned in school if we are tested for it in the same room with the same noise in the background. Likewise, sometimes it is difficult to remember something from school when we are not sitting in the classroom where we learned it. Obviously, we don't want to have to rely on cues in the environment. This is not only impractical, but highly misleading. If we test ourselves repeatedly in the same context and environment in which we have learned something, it would make us overconfident in terms of learning success, because we would not be able to discount the environmental cues that probably won't exist in the context in which we want to remember what we learned.
Hey, can I just jump in there for a second?
Absolutely.
I wonder if there's value in creating our notes, like taking a laptop and doing them in different locations, and that would help embed them in our memory. Because like right now, for me, I'm mostly sitting at the same computer all day, every day, doing all the notes. Whereas like in a classroom, especially when you're in university, a subject is in one room, another subject's in another room. So you kind of it's kind of like memory palaces in some ways. You place memories and experiences in a particular room. But it also reminds me, like a lot of homeschoolers right now, that kids are really having a hard time. So I recommended to my friend's daughter to always do her math on one side of the table, and then move to the other side of the table when she's doing science, and then always just use a different part of the table depending on which subject she's in, and always use that part of the table so that she can try to separate her learning a little bit more, so it's not just in one spot. So it just reminded me of that a little bit. Could that be an issue for us maybe?
I think yeah, go ahead.
Something to that. I have a friend that built a writing shed outside of his house. He calls it the Canyon Road Institute of Humanistic Studies. But then he also has another area within the house that he does where he does only mathematics.
Mm-hmm.
another area where he works on music stuff. And yeah, I think there is something to that, you know, devoting a space to a discipline, or could be.
Well, we have like, this is gonna sound really bad. We have 3 offices on our property. One's my husband's. Well, actually, probably like 4 workspaces, but I only do the farm stuff in one space. And I could probably do some of it in my creative room, but I just have a really hard time switching my brain over when I need to do something that's specifically just farm, especially when I'm doing my CFO stuff. And it's quite different than doing creative stuff. But like, what do you think about that, Bo? Like creating Zettles? I don't know. Just like, would it change the way you do a Zettel depending if you're changing your environment constantly, or would your Zettles kind of get a little bit stagnant if you're always doing them in the same room or the same place?
Well, what this brings up to me is this is why my Rome graph is just meant for Zettelkasten. You know, I don't do, you know, daily note templates. I don't do GTD workflows or anything like that. It's literally just, if you look on my daily notes page, it's timestamps with permanent notes. And I think to me, it reminds me of anchoring, you know, like anchoring yourself to these tasks. And so when I open up Rome, it's like, I know what the task is. The task is I'm going to make a permanent note. And the thing that I keep relying back on or keep falling back on is that it's not a note-taking app. It's a note-taking tool. And it's a note-taking tool. It's not necessarily a calendar tool. It's not a notification tool. It's not a, you know, it's note-taking tool for networked thought. And so when I take that literally, I mean, that's really what I use it for. And so when I fire up Rome, I don't need to worry about all this other clutter getting in the way. But, you know, that's just my workflow. I mean, I don't know.
You know what I did today is, Bo, because like I was doing or yesterday when I was doing my Zettles, is because, you know, we have all those timestamps and all of them are for different. So what I did is for the permanent note for when I'm doing my Zettles, I put like, I got the idea from Nede when she was using the asterisk for the alias, but instead I did a little squiggly, you know, like the approximate sign, and I did it 1 over from my timestamp. So when I looked at my list of timestamps, I knew which ones were my permanent notes, like really quickly. There was like a bunch on the page, which was really nice. But then when I was in it, I was like, yeah, it was like I kind of put my head and said, I'm in Zettel mode right now because I'm on the little squiggly timestamp, if that makes sense. So, and I use the squiggly because I never use it for anything else. So if I ever wanted to just pull up my permanent notes just in a list, I could just do a fuzzy search with just the squiggly if I really wanted to.
I think you are driving home the idea of really just prepping everything for, hey, I'm going to make permanent notes, and being prepared for that. Because sometimes that urge to like, hey, I want to process one of these fleeting notes, it's very ephemeral, you know? So you really have to go, okay, I'm ready to do it. And if I'm ready to do it, all I need to do is fire up the graph. I'm ready to go. And it's thinking about that as well, of like, okay, this is a workflow. This is what I'm building, and really, you know, driving that home. It's just like anything, you know?
Anyway, sorry for that. Just got my brain going a little bit. And by the way, thank you all for like all your little shots here. Glenn especially is Mr. Hilarious. Who knew Glenn had such a humor? He's constantly adding little pokes at me about is this real or not? Thank you, Glenn.
Before we jump back in, I have to hop on another call, so I just wanted to say thanks. This was great. Bo, Rick,
Yeah,
Roy,
good to see you.
Samantha,
You're awesome,
Curtis,
man.
Heather, Michael, Beverly, Chris, Antoinette, Glenn. Learned so much from all of you. So see you next time.
See you, brother.
See you guys.
Take care.
By the way, on that "is it real" thing, I listened to a lecture recently on a case against reality or something. I think it was a fairly interesting lecture. Just side note. On this next section where it starts with connect a piece of information to as many meaningful contexts as possible. One of the things that I know we're getting in the practice of making the connections with relevant notes, but I was just thinking of the state in which I would have, like let's say, let's say 500, 1,000, or several thousand notes, and how I do want to make sure that the relevant notes are actually meaningful. In other words, that there's a strong connection, not just a really loose associative capability, but an actual legitimate strong connection that so as not to have, so if it's got like, let's say 20 relevant notes, that they're meaningful enough that I'll provide them with substantial attention, rather than kind of, just kind of have things pop up in ways that are very loose. I'd kind of like it to really pop up in ways that are very meaningful. And so I was just kind of anticipating, I don't want a note that's got 150 connections. I'd rather have, when the Zettelkasten is really large, having 20 really, or 10, or, whatever, really well-chosen ones. I think that, I don't know, that just was an important little consideration for me to think about.
Hey, Curtis.
Yeah.
You're touching on something that Samantha and I were talking about earlier today, that connecting a piece of information to as many meaningful contexts as possible. So could I attach, and this was one of our points of debate, but can I attach, I think that the answer to that point, that highlighted point, is where I can drag that index into a number of contextual notes, right? Like, I think that the whole idea that Bo was teaching us about it's contextual, no, not contextual notes, relevant notes. When I'm dragging the index into relevant notes, that's where in my mind, I'm attaching it to multiple contexts. So I'm taking your point. I'm trying to make it mechanical to make it relevant to what Bo's been teaching us. What do you think?
And my stress wasn't any sort of a departure of what Bo's teaching us, but rather just that as things develop, to really stress the meaningful element. So I don't just get lazy and go in and create a couple generalized associations, but truly pour over and make every connection as meaningful as possible, which of course is not as possible when your Zettelkasten is small, but as it becomes larger, I think that'll become ever increasingly important.
Okay, so one point is, so I'm trying to go to making it happen. So and again, I'm sort of thinking of it like I'm going to put it in the relevant notes section, but within the relevant notes section, I might begin. Would it matter if I put things in a different order or if I move it around? Curtis, is that sort of part of the intentionality piece you're talking about?
Are you talking about your relevant notes being in a particular order, almost a certain prioritization? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, but I guess if you're trying to find different contexts, you don't ever want to be intentional in organizing things, because then you're presupposing that you're only ever going to use it in one way. You want to leave things maximum flexibility so you can kind of discover it in different contexts.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And also, it's you have to understand that the shared graph, it's like letting kids into the candy store. They're gonna bring over every relevant note. When it's your Zettelkasten, you can be much more discerning. Like I range anywhere between 5 relevant notes that I drag over to 12, unless it's something that's super powerful, like purpose or acting. Then I'll drag over more. But like Michael's saying, it is sort of stumbling upon these ideas that you wouldn't necessarily have considered to stumble upon, and that's the sort of like insight or aha moments. And you're setting yourself up with dragging over of the relevant notes, but you also need to remember that these are all your words. These are all your notes. So you remember it too. And so it's like you remember it, it's in your own words, and then you go, oh, I didn't know that connected. Let's see where this leads me, and traverse down that path of where does this door lead? And then you have all the context of how you got to that note there.
So how many times do you have acting? Like you must have that. How many times in your Zettel?
No, I only have one, or I don't even have that in there, because it's all the conversation can be like, it could be like overall objective, and then it's all the different conversations around that. And it's almost like when you're having a conversation with somebody and you start getting deeply into a topic, it's that each new idea or note that you add is getting deeper into that conversation. So I don't need to go back to, oh, the broader topic. No, it's even more refined. And so that's the original clustering, by the way. The sequence of like how far a note goes down in the nesting, that's how you were supposed to know if something was clustering before you could actually see it. And I don't think I've told this analogy before, but I think it's worth saying now. I'm probably wasting it though, because it's not recorded. Well, it's recorded at the tail end of here, but it's almost like, the nesting sequence, like the reason, like what the index used to do was it would show you what the index cards were behind the curve, right? And it's almost like a country road, and the headlights do the same thing. It shows you what's around the bend or what's behind the two cars that you have in front of you. So the index would say, okay, this is talking about sociology and this is talking about psychology. Okay, cool. That's going to be note 5A6 and then 2AB, right? And that's what the index used to do. But because of what Roam does is you can see all the nested conversations. Let me go ahead and share my screen real quick. Because you can literally see the nested conversation, what happens is you can see this pathway. You can see what down the thread of conversation, you can see that calibration is there. And so now basically you're down that same country road, but because of the technology that we have, you still have the headlights that shows you what's around the bend. But now we have this little digital display that also shows you your GPS, where exactly the next bend is, and then also the next bend. So we can see that calibration is here. We can also see that workflow is here. But even if you look down through this, yes, structure may have been the top level topic, but everything starts getting more deliberately granular as you go down this conversation. So it's structure, atomic, optionality. But then you go structure, pursuit, seeking truth, expression. Structure, pursuit, show up, discipline, calibration, if you see that. And so as you keep going down these clusters of nested sequences, that shows you that it's an interesting way of looking at it. And so how many times do I have acting? I have it once, but the threaded conversation goes down in all these different paths.
Bo, is there, I know, knowing that there's no one right answer, like how many levels could we expect to see? Like below calibration, could we expect to see like 2 on average, knowing that everyone's Zettel's a bit different, 2 or 3 more subs, 5 or 6?
I don't like, honestly, this is a pretty deep nest. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, if you remember that picture that I showed that one day, articles, day 29, right? Let's go to day 29 real quick. There's a photo of Luhmann's sort of, let me find it. This. You'll notice even on this, it's like, if these are all the top level parent blocks, right? You'll have one nested conversation. This is a pretty bad picture, but you have 1 level deep here, right? 1 level deep here. This is, again, the top level right here is all the top level like top level conversations, right? So that would be like structure, thinking, learning, right? Some of them have one note. Some of them have 0 notes that follow it. And that just shows you that this conversation is not interesting to me. But then you have other ones that go 1, 2, 3, 4 levels deeper, 1, 2, 3, and so when you, like, if you get 6 levels deep, it means it's an interesting conversation. That's something that you're interested in. But it's really just, being able to see that. And even in our shared graph here, there's not many multiples, is there? I mean, this is nearly like 200 permanent nodes too, and there's not many that are duplicating. Like, let's see something that's habits. Yeah, even habits only comes up 1 time.
Okay, So we were getting into it, this concept this afternoon. So what you've just shown with the index, which we've been working as a group on for the last 10 days, compare and contrast the index breakdown, what you just showed us, with,
Sorry.
Imagine if everything was completely on the parent level. They were all on the same level. And the only way I got down into it was by dragging into the relevant notes. So compare and contrast, and maybe this is totally stupid, so just be kind. But it maybe, you know, the indexing thing, could you do the same through relevant notes? I'm just trying to, we were kind of having this philosophical point about the level of intentionality you put into your index structure and some of the subpoints versus, oh, do I draw meaning through the context of, this is what Curtis was bringing up earlier about bringing it into the relevant notes.
Can you show me what you're talking about?
No. Samantha, you're gonna have to help me here. Maybe it's just tired, late. We're just tired, but I'm not arguing about your index notes, by the way. I just want to kind of know about the intentionality of in the index notes versus the happy coincidences or contextualization of relevant notes.
So Michael, are you sort of telling on me where I created little place markers for parents that I didn't have an actual permanent note for?
Yeah, let's go. I'm going to go with yes. And I'm not trying to throw you under the bus. It's just,
That's okay. I don't mind. So I'm a rule breaker. I know. So like, I don't have very many permanent notes, but I kind of know what some of the parent ones will be. So like one of them will be culture, because I talk about culture all the time, but I don't have a permanent note ready for that yet. So I created a parent sticky, it says culture, but there's no permanent note behind it, but I've already tucked something under it. And I know it's more like the top level. And so that was our discussion. He's like, well, you're kind of top leveling it. And I'm like, well, sort of, but I already know I'm going to put one there. I just not ready to put one there yet. So I'm just kind of getting it. I just made the space for it. So is that like what you're talking about, Michael, where it's like,
and I'm doing the exact same thing, so I can totally relate to what you're saying, because that makes sense to me, because it also kind of gives me a certain to do. Here's some areas that I need to fill in. They're already in my head, but I need to get them on paper.
Yeah, well, and I write all the time, so I know that I'm going to have a permanent note that says culture on it already. I just don't have it done.
But my argument.
Can I ask you all a question though? How much of that is attempting to form a structure top down?
That was our discussion today, but I did both.
Archiving. Are we trying to archive? Are we falling into the trap of archiving versus how do I intend on using this when I want to have a conversation? I think that was kind of the gist of.
If you watch Rodrigo Pinto's video, he had 60 permanent notes, and it was so easy to see that there was a disconnect between like a conversation and like an archive. And if you watch that video clearly, I mean, you can just sort of see like how he lights up. It's like, oh, wait a second, this is. And I get it. It makes sense. Like, I understand why you would want to do that, but you know, it's if you really want this to be a conversation partner, you don't really know what the next note is going to be. And if it's going to be, you know, culture, is that what you said, Samantha? If it's going to be, culture, then you have to go, you know, then that's what it's going to be. But you don't know what note is going to be culture, if that makes sense. You don't know what note is going to be culture. If you do, then it's you're not talking to the Zettelkasten, you're forcing it, in my opinion.
That was our discussion today.
I'll tell you how I kind of look at it, at least from my own perspective, is I've got this kind of, I've been having the conversation for over 20 years. And so but it's just, it needs, and parts of it are spread all over, and parts of it have never escaped my brain. Well, they've escaped my brain in organic conversation countless times, but they've never been put into physical print. And so there's a whole like structure that I'm constantly having a conversation with, both in terms of a conversation with others and in terms of a conversation with myself. But that's got to now be put down into a more concrete form. so as
I
to
don't-
make
I
it
don't-
more
I-
effective than ever. So that's kind of the way I'm framing this thought process myself.
I don't think it's a concrete form though. I think it's more just like the conversation. You said, you have these revelations as you're having conversations with people, but it's not like that happens organically, doesn't it? It's not like you go forward with a plan saying, I'm going to have this revelation in this conversation.
No, I'm talking about conversations that have already happened. All the organic nature has already happened. And so there's a certain crystallization that's already present, but just hasn't been tangibly put in an organized manner yet.
Of course. And then the act of trying to organize that in an organized manner is top down. What I'm saying is if you look back at those conversations, how did those conversations happen? They happened in an organic manner. They happened in this sort of bottom up way where you didn't know that that's what you were going to go for, right? And it's a pushback. I get the pushback, but if you watch Rodrigo's video and then you watch Carol Leather's video, you'll understand the difference between this is an archive and this is a conversation. This is top down, this is bottom up. And I don't mean, bottom up is all that it is. No, it's like, how's the weather in Seattle? Some days are sunny, some days are overcast, but generally it's overcast. And it's the same thing with bottom up structure in Zettelkasten. And it's primarily bottom up, but there is top down aspects of it as well. I just feel like if you're going to add, I would say go for it, do it. There's nothing stopping you from doing it. I just discourage it because I see the pain of like Rodrigo's face after he does 60 notes and he's like, well, shit, I have to start over, don't I? I go, yeah, you do. And he goes, yeah, I do. Like he's the one that said, shit, I've got to start over. And
Yeah.
I mean, but listen, you can do whatever you want, It's like even with, two notes, two permanent notes with just one set of literature notes. It's like, listen, Lumen did all of that. And there's nothing wrong against that. I just discourage it until you can really have like confiding trust with this dialogue partner, which is very foreign. It's foreign to how we've been taught and how we've, been graded and how we've gotten certainty in life. So,
So is it kind of like, I wonder if it's like this. So I talk about human behavior a lot and people are like, what's your blog going to be about? Is it, because I'm a tax accountant and they think it's going to be like all the stuff I learned in tax accounting. And I can get super excited and nerdy about it and get really crazy about it. But at the end of the day, after all those years of working with people, I learned so much about humans and human behavior. That's all I really want to talk about. And even, I can talk about tax stuff if you really want to, and I'll get crazy, but it kind of bottom up. I didn't start out talking about human behavior. I started out by talking about tax law and taxes and how people work. And the conversation just turned into human behavior because that's what I observed for so many years. So I guess it's sort of like that. But I guess where Curtis and I are coming from is I've already seen that evolution, that crystallization, that I'm truly interested in human behavior. And the tax was just my way to get there, or one way to get there. Travel was also another way to get there. So it's kind of that fight with my inner self. I kind of already know where that crystallization, but I understand the process that you're talking about. Had I just said when I was 22, I'm going to talk about human behavior, I've now just capped it. But instead, it just kind of happened. It happened as the years went on. And then this kind of crystallized and came up and was like, here's kind of my overall theme that I like to talk about.
But it's also starting where you're at too. That's the whole idea. It's like, why would you have a conversation with everything that you already know? It's the conversation, because that would essentially be an archive. That would be a history. So it's starting with right now at this moment, the very first permanent note could be anything. That's where it starts. And then the next note is in relationship to the first note. And then it's sort of building upon that, but it's not about like what I hear both of you saying is like, hey, listen, I know this and I just want to archive this so I can traverse it. But it's like, it's almost like you can't really,
Well, the thing I struggle with, and I touched on this in our conversation, Bo, is when you're going through a book, let's just say you have some book and it's going to teach 10 main concepts, and I blaze through that book, and if along the way I don't take those 10 concepts and peg them to something, right? And right now, maybe I'm not pegging them to anything, but I want to remember them. If I get through the book and I don't remember the 10, then later on, I've got nothing to work with, right? So later on, if I'm reading a book, I need to be able to say, oh, this makes me think of point number 8 I read in that book, right? And I can start tying these things together.
And it seems that's the logical way to do it. But if you're writing your notes on capturing that fleeting moment when you're reading and you're not looking at the paragraphs, you're just looking at the very word in front of you, and then all of a sudden you capture that moment. And if you can capture and process that fleeting moment, what you're going to realize is that this is something new. This is a crystallized thought. You're bringing this up. It's not about remembering the 10 tenets of this book. It's about, in that moment, this idea came to me. I'm going to abstract on it. This is what I think the author is saying. And then I go, what conversation do I want to continue? Does that make sense? It's not about the sort of, again, that's why I say it's like when you're reading a book and it says, these are the 10 things you need to know about this subject, right? Then top down is better to learn that. Like a top-down structure of progressive summarization and looking at it and going, okay, how am I going to remember these 10 facts? But if it's something as you're reading that gleans to you and you go, what is this? And then you go capture it. You capture why this sentence in this entire paragraph, in this entire chapter gleaned out from all the rest, and you capture that. And I think Brian Pagano's video is great with that, is then you go, oh, okay, this is what's important to me. Or even if you watch Patrick's video, it's like Patrick, I told him, listen, this is all I want you to do. I just want you to read one sentence at a time, one word in this sentence at a time. And once something highlights at you, capture it, right? And he went through article after article, after article, after article, after article. We went through like 8 different articles and I just waited. And it dawned on both of us because we both kind of stopped and we kind of took a step back and we're like, oh, you already know this. This isn't feeding your soul. So of course you're not gleaning anything. If anything, this is candy. This is saccharin. And this is, I think this explains why a level of discernment of the information that I want to consume has changed. Because if I can read 8 articles and I'm not gleaning anything from it, if I'm not getting a fleeting note, then it obviously says that I either know it or it's not important. And I can go, okay, when I want to just veg out, I can read these articles. But when I want to dig into something, fleeting note, boom. Like I can read an article on Lumen, I got like 8 fleeting notes, boom, 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 boom. Right? But if I'm reading an article on this, and it's like I can go through 8 pages of this and I'm not getting anything, it shows me that it's not interesting. Does that help, Chris? I mean,
it does. It does. But still, I think if you're, in the case of Lumen and Aaron's, they're reading in these fields. They're just focused on one field generally. And it said Lumen said he could read a whole book and maybe just make one note of it because he already knew all the information. That's because he's just in one field. But if I'm reading books on 20, 30, 50 different things, I'm just saying that there's a mix, and maybe the way I'm doing it, this might be what Vincent was talking about, is, how do you, maybe not, the Zettelkasten might not be the place to do it, because the Zettelkasten is the dialogue, right? It's where the dialogue takes place, where you're having a conversation with yourself. But when you're maybe learning something or trying to pick up just some basic concepts that someone's presenting to you, you need to have a place to hang that.
I also think that that's in the top level parent blocks. That's in the top level parent blocks. You have all the top level parent blocks to show you if this is what you're really interested in. If you're not interested in it, you're not going to have more conversations on that. And then also you do need to remember that Lumen actually was incredibly broad in his topics. And I actually recommend that you become broad in your topics, because if you can have an article on stitching over here, and an article on Zettelkasten over here, and an article on how to pilot a plane over here, and if you can connect all those disparate ideas, that's actually insight, because you can relate things that are in disparate, varied fields. And so Lumen's purpose was to what? write a book on sociology, you know, the all-encompassing sociology, you know.
But just because I read a book of, you know, let's say there's the 10 topics and maybe I find 3 of them interesting, it still doesn't mean I may not need, you know, if I were to have a discussion with someone, they say, well, what about, you know, this part? You said you read the book. What about, you know, topic number 4? Well, I didn't necessarily find it interesting, but maybe I'd like to be able to recall that part and have a conversation on it at some level. So I don't know. I just need to think about how I consume information.
Would you rather have a conversation on what would you rather have a conversation on what the author said, or would you rather have a conversation of your crystallized thoughts that you can be confident in?
Because that reminds me of what you said earlier about once you have that thought in there, like for Chris, I had that this week, Chris, I was reading that book you recommended. And by the way, that's a big deal because I have a huge list and I put that right to the top and started reading it. And so that's quite an accomplishment for you to get me to put a book at the top of the list. There was a bunch of concepts. I'm like, know that, read that. And so I wasn't highlighting actually that much at all because I was like, why do I need to highlight this? I've already heard this before. And I just jumped into the 3 chapters that were the meat of the whole thing that I really wanted to learn. But it was like, oh, I have notes on that somewhere. Like I get they're not in my Zettel, but once I start getting them on my Zettel, I even feel more released to just read it without having to take notes on everything. And does it really matter if you and I talk about that book and we both hash out every single point in there? Mm-hmm. I think just, you know, it's like, what were our crystallized thoughts? And we'll remember they came from that book, but maybe we might remember that it doesn't really matter if they came from that book or they came from 3 other things we wrote about or read about. But it definitely released me a lot. Like it was an enjoyable read and a faster read than normal for me.
Okay.
I have a couple ideas. If I could jump in here for a second, because I was thinking about this today actually, and just a little bit ago I was mentioning in passing about like if I want to read Crime and Punishment or anything, right? I read before, but it's something I want to kind of geek out on, right? You know, so it's like I might just want to have a separate page for that. Just have a separate page for that. Put in all kinds of biographical data about Dostoevsky or whatever I want about that. And that's cool because that's what I'm passionate about. Like I like that data. I like to geek out on shit like that. But so I could write all that. And in the midst of that, like if something is like really like screaming at me, that's the point where I decide that is going to be a permanent note. That's going to go there. So it's the best of both worlds in that sense. I mean, first of all, you're still in the sandbox of Rome, having a blast in Rome, putting everything together. And also I'm doing things like just journaling in general in Rome in the daily page. And if I get an idea out of that, then I'm like, oh, that's an idea for a permanent note or whatever. So I just really like that flexibility. And I kind of had to really think it through to be able to allow myself to get to that point that, okay, I'm going to have a permanent notes page, but I'm going to have a thinking page, and then I'm going to have some other pages along the way.
And that's a perfect example. You kind of cut out there for a second, but yeah, I mean, you have your Zettels where you kind of go in. It's like, okay, here's a unique observation I'm having on this book, but it's a very dense book. And maybe, you know, you have kind of almost something separate outside of your Zettel capture, what you're saying, for capturing just general details about like, who is this character? What did they do? Where did these guys meet? You know, because yeah, I mean, anything Dostoevsky is just like, you know, heavy duty stuff.
You know,
yeah, I mean, it's in a territory of a novel. It gets kind of complicated. I mean, I think in those terms because I read stories and stuff. So I'm thinking about how I can use this system for digesting stories better. And sorry, Bo, cut you off.
Well, no, I just want to add that there is a skill that I don't think that I didn't emphasize much either, and that skill is the actual capturing of these fleeting notes. And when you start practicing like what capturing of a fleeting note is, it's like it's not the paragraph. Like I keep seeing like 3 paragraphs with highlights everywhere, and it's like, is that really a fleeting note? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think the fleeting note is literally that thing that sort of gleans at you that you have a split second to capture. because there's certain times when I was capturing where if I had any sort of friction to capturing that, then I would lose it and I'd have to listen back to it. And what I realized is that when I have a very frictionless way of capturing something, then I'm actually able to pinpoint what it was. But if I miss that, what I have to do is I have to highlight all the other things around it. And it's the less important things that sort of summarize it. And that's the biggest thing that I keep seeing is that, I mean, I understand why though, because you don't want to miss out on all of the picture, but really what an author is doing is an author is literally condensing everything they know in these beautiful sentences that make up these beautiful paragraphs. So of course it's going to be dense. And so to me, I go, how can you really capture 3 paragraphs? Because then you haven't welcomed the author in if you do that, in my opinion, because it's literally when you're consuming this information, right? It's word by word. You don't read a paragraph. Even like, have you ever looked at like a poster on the wall? It's like, can you not read it? It's like, I used to do that as a kid. It's like, try not to read this. And it's like, you read it automatically, but it's like, boom, and you get it. And it's sort of like capturing those moments in a way where it's, why did this moment resonate with me? Why did this phrasing of this sentence resonate with me? And if you really take the time to do that, and then you really take the time to go back to that and process it, you'd be surprised of how much you can pull apart from a sentence. And to me, I go, if the whole point of all this is to slow down and, we're inundated with all this information of this, by that, then it's like, if we really slow it down, I think those 10 points that, you see in a book, Chris, it's like, that fades away. And what really comes to the surface is like why that resonates with you, why that entire book resonates with you. And maybe it's because, you want, to learn more of how to spend your time wisely. And that to me is the permanent note. It's not about the 10 things you learn in the book.
I think you can do both, to Chris's point, as well as Glenn's, especially with, I don't know, fiction and nonfiction, kind of 2 different animals, but for me, most of the interesting work is done in the fleeting notes. That's where the real excitement in life is, because you're kind of allowing yourself to respond in kind of somewhat of a knee-jerk fashion initially, but then you're also trying to go deeper and be reasonable and think hard about what the author is trying to say. So I think, like to your point, Chris, if there's 10 points in a book, you might want to put something, even the stuff that you're not especially that doesn't resonate with you, maybe put that in literature notes, at least briefly, and then, focus more on the things obviously that are of more interest to you. I think you can do both. I don't think it has to be an either or kind of situation. And you do want to respect what the author is saying, whether you agree with them or not. I don't know.
No, I mean, that's a good point. It's just kind of what I want to take, what do you want to take out of it? Something may resonate with me, not necessarily that it's something that I, am going to write on or try and create a whole new line of thought on, but like something like, hey, I'm going to take and I'm going to act on this in some way. And that's a whole separate, it's not necessarily a Zettelkasten thing, but that might be something like in the moment, I might capture it in the fleeting notes and do something with that later. But does anybody else do that? Do you go in and maybe if you have fleeting notes, they don't make their way up to a full permanent note, but you go in and capture something out of the fleeting notes?
I would want to see the mechanics of your capturing of a fleeting note, because it's the whole process of that is that, so you have a book open, you're reading, and you have to have a way to capture that fleeting idea, right? And so you capture that fleeting idea, you do your first pass or whatever that looks like, and then you don't go to processing after that. You go to reading the book again, right? And I'd like to just see what that would look like, you know, to see this golf.
I'm not gonna. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm not gonna run through that now. I'm already way over time. I'm up against the clock on something here I've got to do.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
But no, this has been a good conversation. So thank you for that.
If I may, I'm just going to try and get one more shot in here, as far as reality and fiction and stories. And this isn't, like attacking Samantha, but there's a fiction writer by the name of Stephen Millhauser. Anybody know Millhauser? Fantastic writer. If you've seen The Illusionist with Edward Norton, it's based on one of Millhauser's short stories. He writes novels as well as short stories. In this interview with him, the interviewer says, you've been called a maker of myth. Would you agree with this assessment? Do you consider that myths belong to some other world beyond the reach of man? Or are they intertwined in the texture of the most banal situations or events? And Millhauser says, I'd be happy to agree with it if I knew what it meant. It sounds like a good thing to be called a maker of myth, though I suspect it's only a way of saying that my work doesn't fit the criteria of conventional realistic fiction. Myths that belong to some other world hold no interest for me. If I create fictional other worlds, it's only in order to penetrate the one world that interests me. Reality. And he writes, what a lot of people would describe as fantasy or magic realism. I just thought that was so telling, so interesting. But that's just me. I don't know. But I think you have to read a little Millhauser to, maybe to appreciate that. But I recommend him.
See you, Chris. There's what does it mean to have, this conversation, this communication partner? And, you have all these rules and structure and processes and workflows. And I go, what does it boil down to? And really it boils down to the most simplest way of presenting all of that to a large group of people at one time. And all the nuances and all the edge cases are going to come up. And I think about who are the ones that grasped onto it and got it really good, right? And to me, it's a lot of the people that haven't excelled in formal educational systems. And I think about that and I go, why is that? And the only thing that I keep falling back on is because, the bells and the whistles and semesters and, you have to learn this by this time kind of thing. And what this is saying is what a Zettelkasten is, it's a lifelong journey and it's a knowledge building journey and there is no end to this. And so the minute structure comes into play, then it loses that. It loses the communication aspect of it. And now it becomes, I'm collecting, I'm archiving, I need to remember this piece of information singularly. And it's just, can you do this with that? You can do whatever you want. I just want to make sure that clearly this is what I've done. And clearly this is the outcome that I've been able to achieve by following this simple lightweight structure. Can I venture off into other ways of doing it? Yes, I've thought about it. I've thought about skipping abstracting out on the literature note, and doing all that. But then there's just a part of me that's like, why would I want to make it weaker? I want to make this stronger. And with every word that I write and every word that I do write in the Zettelkasten isn't lost when I do it in Rome anymore. I go, nothing is lost. So why not go through that process? And I think there's just a lot of confusion in regards to, well, am I doing the right thing? And I go, you are doing the right thing, because I had to learn the hard way. And I almost feel like I made this too easy for you all, because if I look at my first couple of notes, it's like, I had summary. I didn't have literature note summaries. I didn't do any of that. And so, I look back at my old notes and I'm like, ugh. But then you also need to realize that my very first permanent note was September 2nd. I hit critical mass by December 2nd. That's only 3 months. So if you dedicate and you do this for 3 months to the T, then it's like, you'll know. But something has got, but you got to do it to the T. You can't go, well, I want to structure it this way with, stocks here, investing here, and my life here, and organized here. Because then it loses the communication and it becomes that thing where it's what we're comfortable with, which Sonke talks about in the book. And if all of the notes, it's just, I'm really thinking about, if all of these notes are in my words, then it changes everything. Then all the questions that you have about why do we have an index here? Like, what is this all about? Or how does that connect? Or, we have this or that. And it's like, oh, it changes when it's your own words. It changes when it's your learning that you're seeing reflected back at you. And I can't explain what that feels like, but I know that you have to do the work to get to that point. And I'm just sharing you that this is the work that I did to get to that point. You can choose to go off and do whatever you like. And I think that's, it's admirable. Go venture off into that. I don't know. This is brand new. Rome has only been around since, June of last year. Sonke wrote his book in 2017. We are literally on the forefront of it. And the response that I've gotten has been spectacular, but that's just because I was asking a different question with everything. I wasn't asking how to do a Zettelkasten. How can I copy the Zettelkasten from analog to digital? I was like, how can I maximize the technology that Rome offers? And I was dumb enough to stumble upon this. And I look at it like, well, what keeps me going? What keeps me going is that if I can have enough people to do this, then it's going to push me to create as much more output. Because I want to make sure that I'm right there with you on the front lines of like, well, how do we output this now? I mean, I know how to write the screenplay, but let's really fucking write the screenplay. And like Mike needs to get this thesis done. Like, and Bart needs to get his thesis done. It's like, this is why I keep setting up meetings with you guys, because I want to see how you're stretching your imagination of going, okay, well, how do we output this? Because then that'll help me teach that as well.
I need to write my eulogy.
Stop it. But the reason I keep saying, is this scary, is because you're going to be butted up against you.
So, Bo, just to kind of build on that, what I was trying to say yesterday when I couldn't get my mic to work properly was, and in chatting with Samantha this afternoon, with all so with all due respect to everyone, and I'm holding my own feet to the fire, all of this is good, but I think that we need to, as humans, we need to have some hard deadlines. We need to produce something, a screenplay, a thesis, an assignment, a sermon, a paper, or whatever. I think that until then, you don't get that crucible that forces you to go, fuck, man, I got to stay up all night to do a Hail Mary to figure this thing out. Because from that, you learn a ton. I really think it's important to have, an accountability partner, but something where doing a tweet or whatever. Anyway, that's just something
You're spot on with that, because that Threadapalooza. So basically, I did the Rome tour with Rob Haysfield. And it was literally that next day I did the Threadapalooza, and it was just like that pressure of having to do that, and that's where I realized that something clicked on a completely different level. It was more than just writing the notes and making these permanent notes. It was that moment where I was forced to output. And then when I was forced to output, something clicked and goes, whoa, this is amazing. I don't have to think about anything. I already did all the thinking. You're absolutely right. But here's the thing. Here's the rub. You have to build these nodes. And you have to build a critical mass of nodes. You have to connect all these nodes.
But then maybe we need to say, once I get to X amount of notes, I have to produce something, because a person could just go crazy and be like, oh, I need 10 more. Nope, I still don't have enough. And then, years go by and you've got 300 of them and you haven't produced anything. So maybe there's some sort of goal thing. Once you hit so many, you have to produce something.
I had 120. I had 120 by the time I did Threadapalooza.
What is Threadapalooza? I'm out of the loop on that.
It's like it was started by Venkatesh Rao in 2017 or 2018. It was basically 100 tweet storm on a topic of your choice, but actually they used to tell you this is what you need to write about. But it was just the topic of choice, and you write 100 tweets. So I mean, at about 120, you don't know where your notes are anymore. Like you don't remember all of them.
We just have to start paying each other or something, or charging each other. If you don't have it, so maybe Michael, you need to give me $500, and every time you produce something, I'll give you back 5.
That's actually really good. That's actually really good.
Actually, you probably should do that with me, because like with my masters, I mean, I was producing something serious once a week because I had to. I was paying a stupid amount of money, and every week on Monday, didn't matter, 11 o'clock Chicago or 12 o'clock Chicago time, I had a paper in. I was in the mountains with a phone sometimes up on a hill trying to get Wi-Fi so I could just get the last bit of my paper done for Monday night. Like I did what it took to get it done. So, but then after that, it's just like, I have that discipline, but you don't. No. So you got to build it in. So Michael brought it up today and I was like, yeah, you're right. Because now he says, oh, Samantha, your podcast it. But my podcast, I can do it whenever I want. There's no real deadline to it.
3 to 6 months is the timeline for 120 notes.
Glenn has got a sense of humor. How could you?
Glenn's hilarious in this chat room. I mean, that's really where it's at, you know. I always feel like when I talk about this shit, I'm like the bearer of bad news. I do, because it's like, no, well, outside of the Rome Book Club, it's like anytime I talk to anyone about Zettelkasten and I see their Zettelkasten, I'm like, yeah, but you have an archive. You have an archive. Nothing is talking to one another. You don't have any insight. You're not stumbling upon these notes. If anything, you're going, these are the 10 things that I want from out of this book. You know? And to tell them that they're wrong, like I have the guts to do it. Like I don't really give a shit. But it's still like, you know.
But what's the point of building your brain? What's the point of building it if you're not gonna share it? I mean, I guess it's all fun. You can build up a ton of information in your head, but at some point you should be doing something with it, because there's another level to learning and satisfaction and just everything when you produce something with it. So that's the part I want to get to, is just like doing something with it, not just logging it for the sake. I probably have 1,000 journal notes that are just sitting around all over the place. It's like, now it's time to make it into something.
Well, let me also add though, that having that driving target of like making something out of it is important, right? But I'm also going to say that even just building it out is something very special. And even if you don't have to output anything, it's still very special to see your thoughts literally being reflected back to you. And because it's all in your words, it's a true reflection. And it's scary because you go, shit, maybe I'm not so well versed in this. Maybe I don't know as much about this. Maybe I am fractured in my thinking over here. And that's the scary part, because there's no, because of what I'm saying and what Lumen said and what Sonke says, it's like, we're not saying like, here's an argument and you're going to fight that argument. No, we're saying these are all your thoughts and ideas, your most intimate thoughts and ideas. If you go to that place, which I really encourage, then you see you in a way that it's not distorted. And if you can have 120 of these notes, that's all you, that's vulnerable, that's really who you are, and you see this as you traverse down your Zettelkasten, that sense of self-assurance is unshakable, but it's frightening at the same time, if that makes sense. And so when I think about why I do any of this, it's that unshakability of if someone comes up to you and challenges you on any one of your ideas now, you can stand firm in it because it's connected with all the other networked ideas that you have. And it's all evidence-based with a one-to-one relationship between reference to permanent note. And that's why I was like, it has to be a formidable, well-versed Iron Man dialogue partner.
So if you're gonna, this is a big, I don't know, Pandora's box you sort of open up, because obviously the fact that people are in this whole milieu means you're pretty serious about challenging yourself. This isn't like an echo chamber where you're awesome, just look in the mirror. This is a challenging thing. So in academia and in scholarly work, you're trying to challenge yourself with, how am I wrong on this? Or how am I full of shit on this? Or how is this idea not right? So in batting back and forth with Samantha, it was challenging the concept of, being in a four walls congregational church versus being outside. Well, there's a lot of traditionalists that say that being outside is a form of idolatry, and that the only pure religious observation is within a building. There was those who would argue the opposite. And so you have to kind of, just as an example of challenging yourself to kind of go back and forth. And so I guess it kind of depends on, what do you want to do? Like, why are you doing this to yourself? Because it's not going to just sort of self-reveal. You have to kind of challenge yourself on, what are the assumptions here? Or what's the critical thought about this idea? Anyway, I'm stating the obvious.
So perhaps, Michael, the benefit also is to show people your Zettles, because like I showed you mine, and then we had a very interesting conversation, and you pulled out something that, like, you talked about environmental as becoming an idol. Well, that wasn't even anything I wrote about. But what I wrote about triggered you into talking about something else, and then we kind of had this diverse conversation that we bounced back about, and then you're like, well, what about this? And then just like, no, this is why I think that, but it wasn't in my Zettel. But the two of us were able to have a very fascinating conversation based on one of my Zettels. So maybe that's what we need to do, is open up our Zettels with people and just be like, let's have a conversation. Let's open up our Zettels together and see what comes out of it. Because you've kind of got one there, but in a way you almost have to defend it and be like, well, why do I think that? What does my Zettel say? But what would I say? And what's missing in my Zettel? What else do I want to maybe investigate or do a fleeting note on? Because there's a hole in there somewhere. Like something you said to me was like, you know what? I need to do a Zettel on this particular thing, this aspect of what we were talking about because of our conversation. So I saw a hole in where I was at, I guess, that I need to fill in.
My only concern would be the lack of depth if you start that too soon.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
I would much rather have 60, 70, 80 notes to go, okay, I've got a good foundation here of really deep notes. Now I can sort of do more presentational sort of ideas, or more like, this is what I really know. But there's something about going off into the deep end of like, I'm listening to this lecture and for some reason this highlighted to me at this specific timestamp. I'm going to abstract out everything that I can about that. And I don't know what's going to come up, and I don't know what conversation it's going to lead to. And then I start seeing it start forming.
It might matter like how well versed you are in a subject. Because like I have a seminary degree, so like I would have lots to discuss in a thing without having my whole Zettel developed.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it like it's learning. It's knowledge building. Yeah. So it's not knowledge that I already have. It's learning and knowledge building. And what interests me is, well, let me just finish this real quick. It's what interests me is what I don't know yet. If I already know it, then I'm not going to capture that as a fleeting note. You know, it's what I don't know yet, and that's what intrigues me. I want to go and find out more, and question that, and argue that, and dispute that, support that. Please, Rick. Rick.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, that's what motivates me. Just the quest for more knowledge and to clarify my thoughts on various concepts, various issues, philosophical problems, whatever. And frankly, I've had discussions like this with a couple of my friends in academia, all of whom have published, multiple books, and they know that I write as much as they do, but I have no desire to publish. I mean, it's never been an interest of mine. And one friend said he thought that was disingenuous on my part, not to want to share what I wrote. Okay. I mean, I'm sorry, but I don't, the idea of, there having to be a product at the end that you can show somebody else. I mean, I'm all for showing, people that I know and whose opinions I trust on something. Like if I wrote an essay on a particular topic, I might show it to a friend or two that I knew was interested in that topic or something, but I don't have any interest to publish or to, So, I mean, I don't know what that says, but I think that it can be an end in itself. At least for me, that's what it is, and that's what I've always done. I've always pursued my own interests for my own selfish pleasure,
Which that's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. And like, I'm not trying to imply that there's only one right way. I was just trying to, this is how I roll, but I respect how you're rolling. And Min made the comment, like, we're just pursuing knowledge for its own purpose. Like, I'm not trying to say there's only one way. So thank you for that.
No, I wasn't. I hope I didn't sound offensive. I mean, that's just the way I sound all the time. Offense. I don't know.
It's all good.
Yeah.
It's a fair comment about why you're doing things and not publishing papers. Yeah.
Yeah.
The beauty is that you don't have to with the Zettelkasten. It's just learning. You're just learning about yourself in the deepest way.
But I guess to be fair to my friend who called me disingenuous, he said, "Well, what if all these authors that you love reading so much? What if they felt the same way you did?" Well, there's a little food for thought.
Or what if you had a Zettelkasten and you had all your abstractions in a single graph, that in your passing you could give that as an artifact of your thinking, so people could still follow your mind and your thoughts and your knowledge.
And I think I don't know who would be interested in doing that.
I would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's one. Hands? Show of hands?
I got two hands. Look at
that. You could take a paragraph from someone, like what we were doing this afternoon, and I just took Samantha's paragraph, which was 3 sentences, and just went to town. And like I do a ton of public speaking for my job. Like, she could literally give me that paragraph of 3 sentences. I could speak for an hour. I could totally speak for an hour on that, because it impacts so many ideas. There was so much stuff there. So you could have Rick, you could have like a debating club or a dinner club or a glass of wine club or whatever club, and just throw sentences out there or a paragraph out there and let people go to town. It's so cool.
Yeah. An idea, yeah.
How you doing, Curtis?
I am well. What provoked that?
No, I'm just checking in.
Yeah, yep. It's good
Well,
stuff.
I think I'm gonna have to check out. Sorry, Chris. I'm gonna have to check out. I'm like losing steam here, and I might not function tomorrow.
What, some kind of an endurance contest?
I don't know. Well, I was telling Michael, I have an autoimmune disease. It's kind of a crossover between lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. So if I like overdo it, I can crash for like days at a time. So I haven't been in a wheelchair for about 3 years, and I don't ever want to go back into it. So I just have to, when my body says stop, I gotta stop.
Oh yeah, wow.
We have been going long. The live session was 4 hours. Yeah, this is going on 3.
It's so hard to say goodbye when you know it's the last one, though.
No, we're gonna figure something out by Sunday. Definitely.
Yeah, the circle thing seems like a good idea.
Yeah, I feel like that's the way to go. And then that way we can do like impromptu sort of Zoom calls or scheduled Zoom calls throughout the week, just to keep everyone connected and also check in on their number of Zettles in their personal Zettelkasten. And really just, I want to get a collection of videos from people that are pushing the boundaries, you know, of like, hey, what if we tried it this way? What if we tried it that way? And then following that and tracking that over time. That way, like the best way to learn how to do something is to figure out all the ways that don't work. And so it's like, we have to test out all the ways that do work, all the ways that don't work, and track it over time. And then that way we, as a group, we can go, okay, well, obviously this doesn't work, but ooh, this actually kind of does work. Let's figure this out. And then as a group collective, we can start figuring out the things that do work.
And I think the circle thing will do a great job of capturing certain threads that lead down certain trails of thought. That'll be very handy as well.
Okay.
And you can also kind of tap into like kind of a spectrum of different intensities of people. So because like I'm looking at blending, like I've got 3. I'm looking at going into one graph, bringing my daily work stuff in to my DBA work stuff and doing the whole thing in one graph. The other one will be whatever, and the third one will be a shared graph for whatever idea. So I can bring you the type A. I got weekly deadlines and stuff, crazy person doing multiple different types of Zettles and projects versus, you know, just learning, like different perspectives is all I'm saying.
So Michael, when we meet next week, maybe we should record it just in case you want to use it later.
Yeah.
It's up to you. We could do that.
Yeah.
Something I'm doing right now, remember I was telling you I'm putting the, what do you call it? The tilde, little squiggly. I double bracketed that so I can easily go and like just pull that up and change it. Like, you know, if later I find my structure's not working super great, I can just easily pull up all my permanent notes and see them all listed on one page and just do an adjustment on there. So that's my way of jumping in, but giving myself a little bit of a rope in case I need to go back to the shore over later.
And you learned a new thing today. I think all of the guys that were trying to explain it are trying to avoid mansplaining, but it's tilde. However you want to pronounce it's your own business, but it's the tilde. It's a little squiggly thing, but it's tilde. But I'm not trying to mansplain. Like I'm totally aware of mansplaining, but anyway. So.
Hey man, I woman-splain things to people. I'll admit it. Sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, it's a man. I need to explain this a little differently.
I make 0 apologies for mansplaining.
You guys are so awesome. I'm like falling in love with so many of you. You guys are really great people. I'm so glad the earth has you on it. You make the world a better place, all of you. So thank you so much for how wonderful all of you are. So
thank you, Samantha.
Too kind, but thank you.
I'm really glad you showed us you, Rick. That was a real blessing. So thank you.
Blessing. Some might say a curse. I think Glenn might say a curse.
You are way too hard on yourself. You're really great. Like whenever you speak, I'm like, dang, I need to know who says that stuff. Like, don't hide. Just own yourself.
So I did upload Rick's video, and I don't recommend everyone watch it yet because I tell him straight up, like, you can go straight into Project Zettles, and it's like a advanced technique, and it's not really an advanced technique. It's sort of like, yeah, meeting Rick where he needs to, you know, at where he's at, you know what I mean? And it's just like, it's important to understand where it's like, if someone gets the concepts and understands how this bottom up thing works, then it's sort of like, do the project notes. You don't need to have all the other things, you know? And I think it's just about, you know, there is no rules to all this, you know, there's guidelines, and best practices, but how would I explain this? It's like driving cross country. Yeah.
But there's, you know, Bo recommended that I watch Rodrigo Pinto's, and that was spot on for some really great tips and specifically for some issues that I was dealing with. And I think for you, there's a great section. If you don't want to, you know, watch all of the one with me, if you watch about the last 8 to 10 minutes, Bo has some really good advice on, you know, not block referencing your permanent notes and how to mine your permanent notes page when you want to bring things out, and the best way to do that. Really good stuff.
You know, I was on a call with someone earlier, just before this meeting, and I was sort of walking them through, and they're very well versed in Zettelkasten and Rome and shared graphs, right? And I was sort of walking them through this process of why everything is in a certain location. And I feel like the biggest disconnect is this idea that the permanent note can literally live anywhere. And it's as long as you like, and the literature notes and fleeting notes have to always kind of be the same thing, but where it lives in the Zettelkasten can literally be anywhere. And the power of the index to give you insight into what that long permanent note is. And I feel like that little piece of information snaps into place so much behind it, because then it's like freedom to go, I don't need to organize it. It's going to organize itself.
Yep.
I was just thinking about that. I was just thinking about how like it's sometimes it's just those small little pieces that really click everything into place. And it's hard to go, hey, this is all of them. It's like, no, it's not. It's the, I almost feel like you have to struggle with it. You have to fight with it. It's like, what is this? What the hell is he talking about this and that? And struggle with it and wrestle with it and play around with it and try to disprove it and try to break it. And then like figure out, you know, why is it structured that way? Why is there 3 children blocks underneath the permanent notes block? Why are we alt dragging or option dragging them over in that way? Why are we hiding it behind a current timestamp on the daily notes page? And as those things start accruing, it's like, oh, okay, you know, okay. And it's just, you know, I like to think that, you know, I blazed the path up to this point, but now it's like on you all to like take that and carry it to where it needs to go. I don't have time to think about the advanced ways of organizing this and that for workflow and processes. It's like, no, my main focus is really geared towards, okay, let's get a new batch of people to learn how to use Rome every day, you know? And it's just, I see the progress that you all are making, and I'm like, yeah, they're the ones that are taking it to the next level. You know, all I did was just sort of, hey, this is how you kind of do it in Rome. Play with it. Simple. It's lightweight. What you build with it, what you make out of it is really what I'm looking forward to. And hopefully that'll push me to go, okay, I saw Curtis blazing the path over here. I saw Beverly blazing the path over here. I saw Mike blaze. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, okay, Glenn's got it over here. And then it's like, okay, let's bring that all back together to this community and we go, okay, this is what works. This doesn't work, you know? And then it's like, okay, well, now 6 weeks, you're going to teach us how to do it, you know? I mean, like that's my vision for it, at least.
Michael, what's that URL that you sent? It doesn't connect to anything for me.
Oh, sorry. It's a book called Men to Avoid in Art and Life. It's a take on mansplaining, but it's done through classic paintings, and it's like basically like a classic picture of a man running into a woman in the countryside, and he's saying to her, you know, I know this is heavy work that you're doing, but you would look so much prettier if you just smiled. Or here, let me explain your lived experience to you. It's just awkward mansplaining things, but it's in art form. It's really completely a waste of time. I'm sorry, but it was just a mansplaining thing. That's all.
How are you doing, Beverly?
I'm doing great because through this as a result of this conversation, I've got a important hearing coming up, and I figured out how to build, I figured out what a reference note looks in that context, and I figured out how to build it out. And so I'm anxious to get started. Yeah. I started with, okay, what does a reference note have to be in this context? And I think it has to be the statute or the case law, or I think because that's what everything's built from.
Yeah, the reference, exactly.
And then, under the fleeting notes, there can be facts. And
also I would even add the abstraction, or you have the facts, but then you also have like the intangible, like abstractions from those facts. And if you can log all of that hidden behind that wall of text, like I think that use case is gonna, I like how I really look at it is like, you're looking through like, okay, this is a similar case. Let's say this is illegal waste, throwing of waste, right? And you click on that sort of relevant note, and then you have all the other similar cases, and then you could click on it and you can see the abstractions, and it's like, oh, you've just now offloaded those cases to this thing. But I think that use case is very interesting as well.
And so it's not only a way of getting everything. I mean, it's just like preparing for a test. You got to get it. You don't know exactly what's going to happen. You got to know the material so you can get up there and do it.
Beverly, is your permanent note in that context? Is your permanent note the argument?
Yeah, it's the assertions. It's the I call them assertions, but they're the declarative statements in essence. But yeah, that's what that would be. But it struck me that in this context, and I know it's not entirely bottom up, but I've got to have an idea in my head to be sure to cover all the relevant reference notes. I mean, references. Yeah, the reference notes, because I've got to have an idea going in, or at least develop that and not let it be terribly organic, because I don't want to overlook something that's important.
I mean, I'm just listening to you, and for me, it's like that's the wrestling with it, though, because the concepts of Sonke's how to take smart notes, the concepts of everything that we've been going through, give enough of a foundation where now it's like you're wrestling to fit your use case and what you want out of it. And I think that's, I mean, I think Curtis is doing the same thing. You know what I mean? It's like you have a specific use case, and it's, it's not necessarily like this or that, or what Rick wants to use it for, or what Mike wants to use it for. And it's just, as long as those concepts are in place, then, and then there's the wrestling of figuring out what the hell, how do I do it? Because that's what I was faced with. I was faced with, okay, this is what I want. How am I going to figure this out? And it's like, let's wrestle with it. Let's wrestle with it.
So that's how I'm doing. Thank you.
Glenn? Hi, Glenn. You're muted.
Hey.
There you go.
What's up?
You've been doing something very interesting.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah. Well, do you want to tell everyone? It's just the whole idea of utilizing your journal entries as reference notes for you to crystallize permanent notes.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like an intuitive thing. I mean, you and I had a one-on-one, I don't know, like 4 or 5 days ago, something like that. And I like the next day or so, you said something like, for some people, you were kind of like a chiropractor in a way. You were just kind of adjusting just a little bit, you know, like that. And it was great for me because for one, I didn't even expect to sit down and have a one-on-one with you, which was awesome because I thought I was just going to be kind of coming into a group setting like this. And it's actually just what I needed because there were just a couple little things that just needed to be, you know, clicked into place. And one of them was to create a separate little area called the thinking page, where it's a structure. It's a Zettelkasten structure, but it's a lightweight structure. So we even went into the CSS and kind of, you know, tweaked out the little template for it. And that just, you know, that's who you are as a person. You know, you're just very patient and you want to make sure that people like get this thing. So for me, you saw I'm far along enough, you know, like this guy, he just needs like a push to get like these few things down. So for me, it's just like I have it two polarities where it's like, well, not polarities, but I look at it in the sense that I have my like thoughts that I want to kind of record and I'm thinking about them. And I'm a journaly person. I journal a lot. So I had to build a system that was going to work for me out of this, and I was just ready to do it right away. So basically, I create these little permanent notes, but they don't necessarily belong in the permanent notes area. So they're on their own page, just kind of like you have your Twitter Zettelkasten project page. It's just pretty much just like that. And yeah, so it's just mining my soul, you know, for heart matter, you know, and then like getting to it, and then I just said, okay, no, I'm ready to start doing this and plugging these things in. And then over a couple of days, like I look at that page and then I go in and I start editing the you know, my grammar on it or whatever, the meaning, making it a little sharper, and then sorting things around where I'm starting to see, because they're starting to build now. I'm starting to see the conversation actually take place, like what I'm thinking about, which is stuff like living alone, you know, stuff like that, writing about living alone and you know, what would that be, like loneliness or
Texas.
you know, solitude and how Texas fucking sucks. Shit like that, you know.
Well, I think you're touching on a really important point too. I mean, I do want to wrap up soon, but that's why it's impossible to teach this, because everyone's use case, once you get past literature and fleeting notes, everyone's use case is completely different. And everyone, you know, and that's where it's just, you can't teach that, but you can support and nurture that exploration in a community, or, you know what I mean, where people are sort of there and like they're in the trenches with you and learning from one another. And yeah, man, super excited to see where that leads.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I'm pretty excited about it.
So basically what we did was we stripped away all the other, it's just basically like relevant notes, permanent notes, you know what I mean? Maybe some abstractions underneath that, but we're not calling it permanent notes. We're calling it, what was it? Thinking notes, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was, well, the page is called thinking page.
Yeah. Thinking page, and then connected thoughts at the relevant notes.
And then fleeting notes underneath it. Yeah. So it's not like I'm trying to like build an argument necessarily, you know, like in literature notes or anything. So we just killed that altogether because I wanted kind of just a space where I could just think stuff out, and then I'm going to summarize at the top level, which is going to be in the thinking page, which is like a permanent page.
We also figured out that you could actually block reference anything in that thinking page, like blocks. You can block reference any of those blocks and then crystallize that into a permanent note in your Zettelkasten.
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah,
meta.
Yeah, the block referencing thing is just like, once I got block referencing several months ago, my mind was blown, you know. It's a pretty exciting time to be alive as a writer and be in this dimension of what we're working with here is a blast. Just even as a journal is like amazing, but with the Zettelcasting aspect of it is really incredible. It's altering, life altering.
Yeah.
Cool. I have a friend that's writing an essay for the forthcoming Cambridge Handbook on Loneliness.
Nice.
Send it to you if I get a copy.
I appreciate it. I could use it.
Couldn't we all? Loners.
Yeah. Lifelong
loners. Yeah. So are you going to publish then, or not?
I mean, I'm sure I will. I mean, I've put out a bunch of books already. You know, like I was close, maybe even 15 books, like in the past, mostly poetry books and stuff.
Cool.
So yeah, we'll see like what's next. You know, like the last one I put out was last year. And so I was kind of like in between projects. And sometimes when I feel like I'm in between these projects, I feel this like depression or something, because I feel like, oh, I'm not being as creative as I could be. And then this freaking course came along, you know, which is like what I needed, you know, because it's like, now when I'm going to start to feel more creative again, I have a system for it. And because I have a system for it, I'm also going to start to feel more creative too.
Yeah.
So it's like a godsend or whatever, you know, for me.
I'm curious, you write mostly like blank verse, or you write in forms or prose poems, or what do you write?
It's a mess, you know, it's a psychedelic mess, you know, it's like Kerouac and like Bukowski and Henry Miller and Dostoevsky angsty shit, and then some spiritual Buddhism stuff in there.
My favorite.
You know. Yeah.
I just want to end with this. I just want you all to know that you are all literally on the front lines. Not even the front lines. You are literally on the frontier of things. And everyone, I mean, I'm getting like people are DMing me, you know, left and right saying, what is going on? What is going on? What is going on? And, you know, it's the work that you all have been putting into this and discovering. And, you know, we're on the frontier. No one's gone here before. Okay. And there's only more people that are jumping ship. They're looking at all the other ways of doing Zettelcast and they're like, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And they're jumping ship over here. And I just want you to be aware of what's about to come, and what I'm really pushing for is, you know, making this more ubiquitous, making this more available. So, you know, when that time comes, it's your experiences with what you're wrestling with, what your experiences with what you're going through and the things that you're learning, it's going to be invaluable. And I just want you all to know that. And, you know, I think we have each other, we have this community, and we have this time that we've literally spent together. This is a lot of work that we've all done, you know, hours, like 40, 60, 80 hours that you've put into this graph, 100,000 blocks, 120,000 blocks. So I'm just proud to stand next to all of you. And I'm really excited to see what happens next. And I really feel like we're the ones that are writing the future. We are. And Connor reaches out to me and he's like, what are you guys doing in this book club? You know, he's like, we are literally the Rome cult. You know, what we're doing is literally the Rome culture. And it's just, I don't take that lightly. And I really think, you know, as you all have reached 5.5 weeks of this, like, you guys have to start taking some responsibility too, because people are going to start looking to you for these answers, and you have them. You're wrestling with it. And so all that being said, I'm going to figure out what the hell where next week is going to be. And yeah, I love you guys, and I will chat with you soon. Okay, and I'll see you all on
Awesome.
Sunday.
Awesome.
Sounds great.
Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
See ya.